Yo, what's good, my great sages? It's your host, Sage D Samurai here, now here today to bring y'all another What If. This being the What If movie to What If Asta was a Viltrumite. Thank you to the person who recommended me this What If. I hope you, along with everyone else, enjoys. As now, with that being said, let's get started. Alright, so to begin the What If, we will now turn to a far, far away planet. This planet being known as the planet Viltrum, home to one of the most dangerous species in the galaxies, Viltrumites. As these species were quite known throughout the galaxy, as they were known for being hardened warriors whose sole and only purpose was to conquer other planets and galaxies just for the sole purpose of expanding the Viltrumite Empire, as that's been their way since the very beginning. Or at least they used to. As current right now, this extremely powerful and dominant species will be on the brink of extinction. And the main reason why would be quite surprising. As you see, somehow, someway, throughout the decades that will go by as the Viltrumite Empire continue expanding and as they continue to evolve as a species, somehow, someway down the line, we would actually see that many of the Viltrumites, the newer one at least, began to gain something that many of the others didn't have at birth. This being they gain the ability to actually feel emotion. They began to gain empathy. As instead of being battle-hungry warriors with the urge to conquer worlds, they have now become much more soft, you could say. As they, instead of conquering worlds, they wanted to protect them and actually, try reaching out and connecting with them. Which was something that, while typically isn't against the Viltrumite custom, since they do want to, increase the Viltrumite Empire, the way that they did it was exactly against everything they were taught. As to them, the strong were the only ones that were meant to survive, and those that were weak were nothing more but useless space that could easily be tossed out or taken away immediately from this world. So seeing that these newer Viltrumites were beginning to actually show empathy and compassion, this was strictly against the old customs, and it immediately caused the current Viltrumite Emperor to be extremely pissed off. As this ends up leading to a very big argument between two groups, with the newer Viltrumites trying to actually change the customs of the old Viltrumites, while the older Viltrumites, including the current Emperor, was also arguing against this one, as neither side was willing to change for the other. As needless to say, this ended up erupting into one ginormous war, with neither side willing to give up, as both of them were trying to make sure that the other side realized that their way was the better way to go about it. As this war between these two groups of Viltrumites will go on for many days, heck, not even days, it will go on for weeks and even months until it is how it is right now. Turning to the scene in front of us, we will now see the current Viltrumite Emperor, who will be there all by himself, bloody, bruised, and currently right now standing on his last legs. As currently right now, right behind him, we will see the ruined remains of planet Viltrum. As currently right now, even the planet itself was not lasting too long, as right now the Emperor will be faced with only five more revolutionaries. That was it. As these five were nothing more but actually the leaders, the ones in charge of the entire rebellion. As they will look at the current, or should I say the former Viltrumite Emperor, as they will be staring down at him with cold eyes, and so suddenly this is when they would once again begin to feel empathetic towards him. As they would try to talk down to him and actually try telling him to end all of this. Listen, we don't need to fight anymore. We don't have to follow their old ways. We have evolved as a species. We can grow a lot more. And at the end of the day, this could benefit the Viltrumite Empire. And you're trying to stop this. Do you not understand what you're doing? One of the revolutionary leaders tries to, talk down to the Viltrumite Emperor and tries to calm him down and have him join their side as a one last desperate attempt. But the Viltrumite Emperor was not listening to none of that. As instead, he'll be staring down at his home's remains as he sees the once beautiful planet known as planet Viltrum now standing on its last legs, ready to crumble. As he'll look down at his hands to see some piece of the torn rubble that he got in, as he'll see as it falls down to the ground like dust, which will soon be this planet as he comes to this quick realization. As now realizing that he has nothing left to fight for, and now realizing that his home, the one place that he loved more than anything else in this world, was now being taken away from him. This is where the Viltrumite Emperor would then snap, as this is when he would then calmly get up, acting as if he had no injuries whatsoever, even though he had enough injuries that a normal person would be dead by this point. As after getting up and after, stretching a little bit, popping a shoulder back in place and everything, this is when he would then calmly look at the 5 remaining revolutionaries. As in a cold tone, this is when he would then tell the revolutionaries, "I don't care anymore. I don't care if this is the end, but I shall make one last promise. Before I die, I'll make sure to paint whatever is left remaining on planet Viltrum with your blood." As he will make sure to tell them this as a solemn promise, with the rest of the revolutionaries panicking, as right before their eyes, the Emperor, which was deemed as the strongest Viltrumite and the most capable, would then suddenly speed blitz them. As one of the leaders would then turn to the side to see his comrade, only to see that his neck was completely snapped in half by the Viltrumite Emperor. As said Emperor will look at the limpless body in his hands with a blank expression, before suddenly it would then turn into that of one of rage, as he would then rip this Viltrumite's bodies to shred right in front of his comrades, as the rest of the revolutionaries there watching would look on in pure horror, as this is when the Viltrumite Emperor would then turn his attention onto them, as with no fear whatsoever he would then scream at them to bring it on, as this is where the final battle between these two groups would then happen. And it will be a long and powerful battle. Like, even though the Viltrumite Emperor was supposed to be on his last legs, and honestly he should have been dead by this point, he still remained fighting, as his sheer willpower and pure rage was more than enough to keep him alive long enough, as he would completely decimate the last remaining revolutionaries, as he made sure to do exactly as he promised earlier, and paint whatever was left of planet Viltrum in their blood. As by the time the fight was over, we would then see the Viltrumite Emperor, now battered and bruised and beaten to beyond belief, remain there standing over the countless bodies that are around him. As we could see that many of the revolutionaries, and more precisely the leaders behind the revolutionary, were all surrounding him, each one of them taken down in a very horrific fashion. As he would be staring down at everything around him, the destruction, the bodies, and everything that happened on his home planet, as he would just look at it before actually shedding a tear at how everything went down, at the loss of his home, at the loss of everything that made him who he was, all gone right before his eyes, as he would look down at his bloody and beaten body before finally then deciding to just simply fly away, as by this point now this will mark the end of planet Viltrum. As now turning to the next couple of weeks that will go by following the events that had occurred, we will see the previous Viltrumite Emperor as he will just be there roaming throughout space, not at all caring about the damages that his body had sustained, and not at all caring about the fact that he was actually slowly dying due to them. You see, Viltrumites are typically able to heal from almost anything, but you see, there's a key word in that, almost. The amount of injuries that the Viltrumite Emperor had taken was way beyond a normal Viltrumite's capacity to regenerate from, or at least they're not able to regenerate it normally. They need to actually rest. But unfortunately, due to how fragile his mind state was at this moment, and due to just simply not all caring for his injuries and just willingly let them just lay about and be there as he roamed throughout space, the Viltrumite Emperor would be healing a lot less, and due to this, he would actually slowly but surely be losing life. But he did not care for any of that, as now that he lost his purpose and now that he had nothing else to live for, he honestly didn't really care about how he went out anymore. As by this point now, he's just ticking down the time, waiting until his inevitable end. Or at least, that's how it used to be. As on this very particular day, as we will now turn to it, we will see the Viltrumite Emperor, as by this point now, he kind of dozed off while he was in space, and this actually caused him to actually begin to crash land on a certain planet, as he will crash land on Earth. Then you see, flashing forward to a couple of moments later when the Viltrumite Emperor awakens, he'll wake up only to see himself inside a nice and small cabin, as he'll be looking around in confusion as he has never seen a place like this in the entirety of the time that he's been alive. As he looks around at this small cabin until suddenly the door would then open as a lady would then approach. She would ask if he was alright, as the man would stare down at her, as he would immediately take a look at her appearance. The woman was unique to say the least, as she had a combination, a rather unique one, of gray hair along with green eyes, as she would be there looking at the former emperor with a smile on her face, not at all knowing exactly who she was staring at. The Viltrumite Emperor will be looking at this lady as he would just be staring at her for a couple of moments before just simply laying back down in bed, not at all caring. Now the woman herself would be there speaking to him as she would eventually introduce herself, this being Licht, as she begins trying to connect with the Viltrumite Emperor and question him about exactly what happened to him. As now doing a little bit of a flashback to recall the events, during the time when the Viltrumite Emperor had crash landed on Earth, Licht would actually have been nearby seeing the whole thing. As she immediately rushed over to check what was going on, only to see the very extremely injured man who seems to be on death's door. As even though she was quite hesitant to help him due to her unique circumstances, she still decided to do so due to the fact that she was simply a kind person. As it would be due to this empathetic nature that will lead up to the following moments now, as we will now turn to the very present where we see Licht once again just taking care of the Viltrumite Emperor. As we will now flash forward to a couple of months following these two actually meeting with each other. As you see, during these months that will go by, we will see that both Licht and the former emperor were actually beginning to get along and actually begin to like each other. As throughout these months that will go by, the Viltrumite Emperor and Licht will begin to create a connection with each other before eventually going into the lines of a relationship. As Licht was extremely happy to find the man that he was, considering the fact that he was the only person on this entire planet that was not at all affected by her curse. Meanwhile, the Viltrumite Emperor was actually just happy to be with Licht, as in all his years he has never met a person quite like her. And due to the fact of just how unique she was and how the fact that she just seemed to click with him instantly, this would cause the Viltrumite Emperor to actually begin to let down his guard and actually begin to learn and to care for her. As this will cause the Viltrumite Emperor to actually evolve and begin to gain a whole new perspective on life itself. As the longer these two were with each other, the longer they benefited from each other. Licht actually had someone she could talk to, someone she could hang out with, and someone that she deeply cared about. And the Viltrumite Emperor actually had someone that he cared about as well, but also someone that just taught him a new way of life, showing him that he doesn't need to be a battle-hungry warrior and a world-conquering being. He doesn't need to be an emperor. And this would be something incredibly heartwarming as we will see the wholesome couple actually continue to grow and evolve as these two just begin to enjoy the time that they have together until its inevitable end, unfortunately. As sometime throughout the months, during the time when Licht would actually have her son and everything, this is where unfortunately the previous Viltrumite Emperor would then pass away. As the main cause behind this wasn't because of Licht's curse, considering the fact that Viltrumites have a very long lifespan, it would in fact be due to the fact of his old injuries. As you see, due to the injuries he had sustained during the war, and due to how severe they were, this would actually cause the Viltrumite Emperor's lifespan to be cut drastically. And even though if he were to, get healed up and regenerated properly, none of this would have happened, unfortunately do remember that the previous emperor had actually floated around space for many weeks, not at all resting and not giving his body enough time to recover from just how severely damaged it was. And in fact, had he not crash landed on Earth and met with Licht, he probably would have been passing away much sooner. But due to the fact that Licht had helped him out and actually was able to patch him up the best way she possibly could, he was able to live for a couple more months than was intended. And he would forever be grateful to that, as he realized that had Licht not saved him and had Licht not patched him up, then he would not have met the amazing woman that she really was. And he would actually make sure to tell her that in his final moments, as he made sure to at least have her have like an easy mind, letting her know that all this wasn't her fault. And in fact, she was the main reason why he got to live as long as he did. As it would be a very heartwarming yet very sad goodbye between the couple, as just like that, the Emperor would then pass away, as we will now begin to see things begin to fall in line with the canon. As you see, from this point on, we will see Licht, she begins to proceed to do the same thing she did in the main timeline by leaving Asta at the orphanage. As well, yes, she did feel a little bit conflicted concerning the fact that Asta's father did not seem to, really be affected by her magic and everything. It still didn't change the fact that she still felt scared and hesitant, as just the fact that she lost her husband already was already enough to shake up her psyche. But the fact that there might be even a slim possibility that she can lose her son and it could be due to her, that was enough to cause Licht to then proceed to do drastic actions, as she proceeds to leave Asta behind at the orphanage, as she knew at least there Asta would be safe and protected. As she would stare down at her child for one last time before giving him a kiss on the forehead and hugging him, as well as saying her final goodbyes in tears. As right after that, we will then see Licht then head back to her home, all the while Asta would just be there, casually there at the doorsteps of the orphanage, waiting for whatever life has in store for him. As now with these events taken care of, this is where we can now do a big time skip. So now flashing forward to the next couple years that will go by following the events that occurred, we will now see things begin to align similar to that of the main timeline. As we'll see Asta growing up in Hodge Village at the orphanage, along with the rest of the kids there who would eventually become his siblings. Now Asta's time there would be spent doing basically the same thing he does in the main timeline, just growing up in a world filled with magic while he himself had none. As he would do as for the only way for him to compete with the people that did have magic was for him to train and try to get himself as buff as possible to at least compete with them. But even that, there was obviously a very large gap in difference between Asta and the rest of them. But even then, he didn't give up. As these events continue to align similar to that of the main timeline until eventually we will then get to the time of the Grimoire ceremony. Now you see, during the events that happened at the Grimoire ceremony, we would not turn to see Asta, as he will be there just casually just in the trees right now and just looking down. As we will be seeing him right after he unfortunately did not get a Grimoire and had embarrassed himself in front of everyone, including Yuno, as Yuno didn't even declare to Asta that he was his rival. Now as Asta would be there just looking down at the tree, this is when he would then snap himself out of the funk, saying that he's not willing to give up, as it didn't matter if he had magic or not, as he was going to still become the Wizard King. As he would make sure to remind himself of that promise that he made to Yuno, as right after that, this is when he would then begin to rush over back to Yuno in order to once again show him his resolve. However, when Asta ends up returning back to Yuno, this is where he would then see him getting attacked by Revchi, the Chain Mage. As Revchi would be there, looking down at Yuno's Grimoire, intending on selling it, this is when he would then turn to see Asta. Huh? What? Oh, it's you. The one that doesn't have a Grimoire. I got no time to deal with you. Go bother someone else. Revchi would let Asta know very clearly, as he already dismisses Asta, considering the fact that since Asta didn't have a Grimoire, he already knew that he couldn't possibly put up a fight. Although Asta would just be there watching all of this, as he takes in the fact that Yuno is captured right now, and he also realizes what Revchi intended on doing. As immediately Asta decides to then proceed to do action, as he tries to attack Revchi, only for it to end in failure, as he ends up getting flung into a wall due to Revchi's chain magic. As Revchi laughs at Asta's pathetic attempt at trying to save his brother, as this is when he'll begin to actually make fun of Asta, considering the fact that he senses no magic within him at all. As Asta would be there just taking on these insults and being at the very urge of giving up, this is when something would happen. Asta would then feel a ginormous urge of power, just like a ginormous surge of it just going through his body. And at first Asta thought it was just simple adrenaline, but no, this was something entirely different. It's something that was outerworldly. And also noticed it immediately as he would clench his fist, which by the way he was holding onto the ground while doing this. And that's when he realizes that literally the very concrete ground that he was holding had actually crumbled the second that Asta had crushed up his palm. Like he literally broke the concrete using his hand. Like that's not normal, no matter how hard you train. As Asta would be there looking at what he did in complete shock. But that was not even the only thing that happened, as suddenly a Grimoire would then appear right in front of Asta with a ginormous sword poking out of it. As Asta would just be there taking in this entire sensation, before suddenly he would then grab the sword and swing it a couple of times, while Revchi would just look on in pure confusion. As eventually he would then get bored of it as he would try to attack Asta, only for him to be surprised, as this is when Asta would then disappear right before his eyes, before appearing right in front of him. As right before Revchi even got the chance to register what happened, this is when suddenly he would then be flung directly into a wall before cratering into it due to a slash by Asta. As this happened so fast that Revchi's body couldn't even keep up with what just occurred, as he felt no pain at all. He felt no pain, all he felt was the ginormous amount of force that went through his body. As by the time the pain finally registered, he was already falling into unconsciousness as he would foam at the mouth. As now with Revchi defeated, this is where we will then see Yuno then get freed as he looks at Asta in pure amazement. Although Asta would just be there looking down at himself as he wonders what was up. As this feeling of strength and also this weird Grimoire, it was just a lot for him to take in as he wonders what the heck was going on. But he would soon have time to figure all that stuff later, as for now, he had to focus on the fact that he actually helped out Yuno, as eventually he would then walk over to Revchi, who was still unconscious, as he would then take the Grimoire away before giving it back to Yuno, who ends up thanking Asta for it. As just like that, we will begin to see things follow a line similar to that of the main timeline, with both Asta and Yuno once again, remembering their promise and deciding to, once again do it again, as they will bump fists with each other and then declare the challenge to find out which one of them was going to become the Wizard King in the future. As just like that, with these events now taken care of, this is where we can now do a time skip. So now, flashing forward to the next following months that went by following these events, we will now turn to see Asta and Yuno as they will proceed with their training in preparations for the Magic Knight entrance exams. However, during the time of their training, we would already see some things play out differently compared to how it was in the main timeline, mostly when it came to Asta. As during this point, Asta will be experimenting with his newfound Grimoire and his newfound abilities, but the main thing that piqued his interest was his newfound strength. And not even strength, it was speed, it was reflexes, it was everything. It was as if all the stats that Asta had before were now incredibly buffed. And it would really show, as during this point, Asta could feel everything. Like his senses were off the chart. He can sense something that was like miles away. He could even hear when Sister Lily would call out to him when it's time for dinner, which would be surprising to Asta, as it was usually like the kids in the orphanage who had to find him, then bring him back over there. As honestly, this would be a lot for Asta to take in as he tries to find out the main reason why. But due to Asta being, well, Asta, the best conclusion he can come up with was the fact that he trained so hard that his body was now basically superhuman, as that was so far his only real explanation as to why everything was the way it was. But still, besides all that though, we will see Asta continue on with his training, obviously, but the main thing that changed from here is the fact that Asta's mastery over his anti-magic will be far greater compared to how it was in the main timeline. And the main reason behind this will be due to the fact that thanks to Asta, thanks to Asta's Viltrumite body, this would actually allow it to take in a lot more anti-magic and allowing for Asta to get a good feel for it. As due to him just training day in and day out, and due to the fact that his normal strength exercises were no longer working due to how incredibly buffed he was, and due to how basically all that stuff don't really do anything else for him, that gave him a lot of time to focus on his anti-magic, which caused him to master it a lot more compared to how he was in the main timeline. And this would benefit Asta greatly, as we will now turn to the very present moment where both him and Yuno would then set off to the Clover Kingdom, as they end up arriving there to take the Magic Knight entrance exams, with everything playing out almost exactly as it does in the main timeline. As this would continue to play out all the way until eventually it was time for the actual exam portions of the Magic Knight entrance exam. As you see, during these portions, we will see things continue to play out, as Asta would try his best to accomplish every single task that the Magic Knight captains would set up for him. But the thing is, Asta, while he is stronger and most definitely is way more skilled compared to how he was before, unfortunately, Asta was still Asta. He didn't really have any magic, and he didn't really have complete mastery over his abilities. As even though he has a good amount of control over it, it wasn't enough for him to complete all the portions of the exams, as he had to power through most of it, which although it did work for some of them, at the same time it didn't work for all of them. As this will continue on like a pattern until eventually it will be finally time for the 1v1 matches, as this is where we will then see Asta face off against Sekke. As now quickly changing to the scene, we will now turn to see both Sekke and Asta as they prepare for their fight. As Sekke would be there, obviously making fun of Asta, telling him to put on a show so that way he can impress the captains. However, right as Sekke would just continue on boasting about his magic and continue, mocking and looking down on Asta, this is when something very confusing would then happen. As while Sekke would be doing this is where we will then see Asta's mood and just entire personality then take a shift. As we will see Asta, instead of being very gullible looking and lighthearted and everything, this is where we will then see his expression harden and being very determined. And in fact, he would even get into a fighter's stance, something that would surprise everyone considering the fact that Asta, most of the time he just acted like a typical goofball, but now he looked actually very serious. Now many of them saw this and were surprised, but still thought that Sekke had it, considering the fact that they could tell that Asta barely had any magic, with some of them even thinking that he had no magic at all, which he didn't. All the while Sekke, he would just be there looking at all this confused, but didn't really care too much about Asta's appearance, since he still thought that he could win. Meanwhile for Asta, he'll be closing his eyes for a moment while taking a couple of deep breaths, before suddenly opening his eyes once again as he proceeds to lock in. As this will be something that he actually learned from Kruger, who actually taught Asta this while he was also teaching him how to, different sword techniques and everything. As you see, during the time when Asta was training with the Wind Mage, This is when Kruger then realized that Asta, even though he was an incredibly talented fighter, and even though Asta was very strong, obviously, he realized that Asta seemed to get very sidetracked. Like, he didn't really have that kind of lock-in mode when it came to fighting. So due to that, he decided to give Asta a little bit of advice when it comes to fighting, and also teaching him just the ability to kind of focus on a battle and kind of shut off everything else. And this would actually proceed to help Asta greatly, as he did not only use this for just simple fighting, he used it for even training as well. As this would cause Asta to increase his mastery of anti-magic, it would also lead to the events that are happening now. As now turning to the battle between both Sekke and Asta, right as the battle were to begin, as the announcer would then tell them to start, this is where Sekke would then form his barrier, just like he does in the main timeline, and tell Asta to give it all he's got. Meanwhile, Asta, he wouldn't react to any of the taunts, and instead, he would just calmly pull out the Demon Slayer sword as he looks down at it for a couple of seconds. As just like that, Asta would instantly turn his focus right onto the barrier, as suddenly swinging down like very calmly, very slowly, or at least that's what most people saw. This is when, to their surprise, a tremendous amount of force would then suddenly shoot out from Asta's slash, as it will be so powerful that it causes a general shockwave and causes the rest of the captains to look on in complete shock, and more precisely Yami, as he would then see a very familiar technique happen, as Asta would then shoot out an anti-magic slash from the Demon Slayer sword, as this anti-magic slash would be so fast that Sekke had no chance to even dodge or even react to it, right before it would then slam directly into him and knocking him out unconscious, while also completely neutralizing his magic spell, surprising everyone. As they couldn't believe what just occurred, as to them, Asta's slash was like looking very slow. It looked like he barely put any power into it, but that was not the case. As Asta, he was actually gathering a large amount of anti-magic before suddenly swinging the sword into the very last second. Basically, he kind of made it like have like a wind up, basically, like, you know, kind of like a small build up before suddenly releasing the big thing. That's basically what Asta had done. As this would surprise everyone, as Sekke would just be there in the crater unconscious before the announcer would then announce that Asta was the winner. As Asta would look at everything that happening before suddenly snapping back into his regular lighthearted self as he begins to run over to Yuno to brag about it. Meanwhile, back at the stands, we will turn to see Yami as he will look at Asta with interest, as he will begin to think in his mind, wait a minute, that technique, he couldn't possibly be from there, could he? As now, Yami was very much interested in having Asta onto his squad, as he had a little bit of questions for him and also to find out more about who exactly he was, as everything about him was just completely odd and was just too interesting for Yami to ignore. As right after this, we will then proceed to see the rest of the exams as they continue to play out similar to that of the main timeline, until eventually it will be finally time for the squad selections. We will see some people go into Magic Knight squads while others don't, as eventually we will then see Yuno then go to the Golden Dawn before finally it was time for Asta's turn. Now when Asta steps up, unlike in the main timeline, this is where we will then see Yami as he then immediately gets up, as with a serious expression, this is when he then tells Asta straight up, yo, you're joining my squad. Oh yeah, and you have no grounds to reject this. Now this will cause everyone to look at it, look on in complete shock, as they couldn't believe that Yami had just blatantly told Asta that he joined his squad and that he couldn't refuse it. Meanwhile, Asta, he would be looking at this, and instead of panicking and everything, he would actually be quite happy about it, as he would be kind of smirking before turning to Yuno, as he ended up like laughing at him a little bit, letting him know that a captain actually wanted him and actually spoke up, telling him that he wants him on the squad. Meanwhile, Yuno only had people raising their hands for him. Now, Yuno hearing this would obviously not really care, but other than that, we will see things proceed just like they do in the main timeline, with Asta joining the Black Bulls. As from then on, afterwards, we will then see things continue on just like in the main timeline, as there will be no real changes here that would affect the story. And this would continue on all the way until Asta would then arrive at the Black Bulls base. As right after saying goodbye to Yuno and going into the portal with Finral and as well as Gordon and Yami, he would then arrive at the Black Bulls base as they will be approaching it. Now, Asta's first thought when he saw the base was that it was ginormous. Like, legit, this thing was multiple times way taller than even he was, which wasn't really that surprising, but still. But as they were getting closer and closer to the base, though, this is when, to their surprise, the front part of the base would then suddenly break open, as this is where Asta would then see the chaos. As inside, he will see the rowdy bunch of the Black Bulls, causing just ginormous amount of shenanigans and everything, causing Yami to then get upset as he tells them to settle down, while also breaking the place as well. Now, Asta's first thoughts about all of this was that they were crazy, but still cool in his eyes, as then afterwards he would then give his introduction. Now when Asta is done giving his introduction and everything, this is when he begins like talking to everyone, getting to know them. But right as he was like, beginning to settle in, this is when Magma would then step up, letting Asta know that he was not fully a part of the Black Bull squad just yet, as he had to get through the baptism. Now Asta hearing this would immediately accept any challenge that was thrown his way, as he would not turn to when they're outside. Now Magma would be here immediately telling Asta that he needs to get ready, with Asta immediately pulling out the Demon Slayer sword, preparing for anything that Magma threw at him. As right as the two of them would then get into a stance, and after a tense silence would then show, this is when Yami would then tell them to begin. Magma immediately without any hesitation would create a fireball, as he would then launch only one of them towards Asta, who ends up deflecting them like they were nothing, with his actions immediately impressing Magma, as he would then begin to up the tension as he continues firing more and more fireballs towards Asta, who has no choice but to deflect all of them or just, cut them apart. Now Magma would see this and immediately smile, as this would continue on for a while until Magma would then release his final attack on Asta, which was supposed to be unavoidable or like Asta was not able to slash it. But just like in the main timeline, Asta would be able to send it right back at Magma, and this would actually surprise Magma this time, as the force from when Asta sends it back at Magma will be multiple times stronger, as legit this time it didn't even hit Magma this time, it only flew past him, as right before anyone could react, all they could hear is a ginormous boom coming from behind Magma. As slowly we will then see the entirety of the Black Bulls and turn to look behind Magma, as they will then see the destruction that was caused from Magma's attack. As legit, the force that Asta had hit the attack with was so strong that it changed the miniature fireball into a ginormous bomb that destroyed a large portion of the forest that was behind Magma, as it literally looked as if a ginormous bomb was let off in that area. As every one of the Black Bulls would look on in complete shock, before Magma would then turn to Asta slowly and walk over to him. As Asta seeing this would immediately panic, thinking that he'd gone too far, only for Magma to then grab him by the shoulders and then scream at his face that was by far the most manly thing that he has ever seen. As that would immediately cause the rest of the Black Bulls to then rush over and compliment Asta, as they had never seen something quite as amazing as what he had done just there. As Asta would take all these compliments, obviously accepting them, although deep down he was trying his best to hide the fact that that wasn't planned. He did that on the fly. He had no idea how to respond to that fireball, and he just hit it with his entire strength. So yeah, needless to say, Asta ends up becoming a Black Bull by the end of the day, as afterwards we will then see things continue on to play out similar to the main timeline, with Asta eventually meeting up with Noelle, getting introduced to her. They have a little bit of a bumpy road during their first introductions and everything, but later on they eventually get to know each other a little bit better after Asta saves her, as they become cool with each other, with Noelle developing that crush. But other than that, things wouldn't change up too much to mess up the story, as the real changes really begin when Asta gets his first mission, as we will now flash towards the moment. Turning to the next couple of weeks that went by, after Asta had become a Black Bull, we will now turn to see him as he would just casually be there at the Black Bull's base eating breakfast, along with Noelle, as the two of them would just be there eating their breakfast while also making idle chit chat here and there. This is when both Magma as well as Yami would then appear at the base, as they would then immediately tell both Asta and Noelle that they got their first mission. Now Asta hearing this would be stoked about it, as it would then be informed that they're going to remove a couple of boars from Magma's home village. As hearing this, Asta was obviously very excited, as turning to when they actually end up arriving at Magma's village, we will see Asta take care of the boars by himself. Meanwhile, Magma and Noelle would just be there watching the whole thing, with Magma being too tired since he brought Asta and Noelle there, and Noelle having no control over her magic to really help out. As Asta would take care of all the work, and he would do it very quickly, as thanks to his Viltrumite strength, Asta would be able to take care of these boars like they're nothing, which would allow the team to finish up the mission way earlier. As right after doing so, they would then head back to the village, but upon their arrival there, this is when Asta as well as Magma will then see that something is off, as he sees that all the villagers would be there panicking, and the village chief would be there in front of all of them, trying to calm down and trying to stop whatever was causing the stress. As seeing this, Magma and Asta would immediately step up with no hesitation, as when they do, this is when they would then encounter Heath and his men. As Heath would be there seeing Asta and Magma approaching, as he sighs before looking down at his watch, saying that he doesn't have any time for this, as he would once again demand the villagers to hand over the magic stone, with the village chief trying to argue that he doesn't have any idea what the man was talking about. As feeling frustrated about not getting what he wants, Heath would then try to attack the villagers, only for Magma and Asta to then intervene, with Magma after doing so feeling extremely pissed off, as he would then demand Heath to explain himself, only for the man to just completely ignore him. And heck, he did not only just ignore Magma, but also Asta as well.
as he would focus on his watch instead, realizing that time was running out. As he then sighs, telling them that he doesn't have time for these childish games, as he would then summon out a bunch of ice shards, with these ice shards not even being aimed at Magma or Asta. Instead, it was actually aimed at the villagers, as the villagers would look on in pure terror as they try to move out the way, only for the ice shards to then kind of lock onto them, as there was no escaping it. As Heath would then once again demand for the magic stones, with the village chief trying to tell him that he has no idea what he's talking about, which only makes Heath angry, as he would then summon out a single ice shard before launching it at the village chief, intending to stab him in the chest. However, before the ice shard could even hit the village chief, this is when Asta would then intervene. As using the Demon Slayer sword, he casually ends up breaking the ice shard before he even gets close to the village chief, as right afterwards, with a serious expression, this is when Asta would then tell Magma to leave the rest up to him. Now Magma, hearing this, would then turn to Asta and immediately tries to, tell him that he was not going to let that happen, only for him to stop as he sees the seriousness behind Asta's eyes. As right after Asta would then walk past Magma, this is when he would then step up to both Heath and his men as he will stare them down, with them doing the same thing. As by this point, looking into Asta's mind, we will see that he had figured out everything, as he realized exactly the main reason why these mages planned to attack the civilians, as it was only to force both him and Magma to let down their guards so that way they can get free attacks on them. And while Asta was very confident when it came to dealing with that, the one person he was truly concerned for was for Magma, considering the fact that Magma by this point only had about 50% of his magic really left in his body to really put up a fight, considering the fact that he did have to take both him and Noel here to the village in the first place. Basically, Magma was nerfed during this time, and Asta feeling guilty about what he had done, and feeling guilty that Magma had to fight at such low power by this point, he decided to take the sole responsibility of everything that's happening right now onto himself, as he decides that he's going to take care of it by himself without Magma's help in order to repay him for bringing him over here. As now with his mindset, this is where we would then turn to see Asta, as he would then take a deep breath before then gathering a ton of anti-magic. As legit, right before everyone's eyes, they could feel the tension growing, as they feel as if a ginormous pressure was just set upon them. As Asta, gathering a ginormous amount of anti-magic, this is where we will then see him calmly open his eyes, which had been closed during this process. As the last thing that Heath, as well as the rest of his men, would then see will be Asta's eyes then turning a demonic red. As we will now do a quick time skip. So now flashing forward to after the events that had occurred, we will now see Asta as he will be staring down Heath and his men, as they will be by this point completely beaten up and knocked unconscious while also being restrained by, Magma's fire magic. As Magma will be there, making sure to focus all his attention on it, although you could see that he was actually sweating a little bit with Asta being near him. And heck, he was not the only one, as Noelle herself, even though she was next to Asta, she herself was also, being quite nervous when being around him, while the rest of the villagers that were there would be thankful, but you could see that they made sure to keep a firm distance away from Asta. As Asta seeing this was inside, but he could understand exactly why they did it, since even he himself was hesitant to go into that state, that form. As doing a little bit of a flashback to turn to the events that had occurred, to everyone else, to Magma, to Noelle, and to all the villagers, all they saw was Asta getting covered in like this black and red energy. As before any of them could even react, Asta would then disappear. As in the next following moment, all they could hear would be the sound of the ice shards being completely destroyed extremely fast, and the next thing they would also be able to hear or even see would be Heath and his men getting sent flying in all sorts of directions, with many of them cratering into people's homes, into the ground, or just getting sent flying out of the entirety of the village before landing a calm distance away. As needless to say, this would be very shocking, as this would happen so fast that none of them even got a chance to even move or say anything. As by the time that Asta was done, he would then suddenly exit out this transformation or whatever he had gone through, as he would just calmly stare down the villagers before turning to Magma and asking him for help to gather all these criminals. As now with this flashback done, this is where we then turn to the present. As since that moment, the rest of the villagers and also Asta's teammates would just be there, kind of cautious of him, considering the fact that the tension, or more precisely, the pressure that Asta had, released on all of them, they could feel evenness to it. Like, it felt unnatural. It felt completely unknown, and that got them spooked. As even Magma felt pretty hesitant to be near Asta, but still at the end of the day, he realized that Asta had helped his village and was incredibly thankful. So due to that, he tries to, remain calm and everything, although he still wouldn't forget about what happened with that transformation. But besides all this is where we now skim forward with the story, as you will now see that the rest of the events continue to play out similar to the main timeline, with obviously major differences here and there. With the number one thing being the fact that the village chief was still alive, and not only that, but Heath and his men would actually be taken to the Clover Kingdom to get interrogated and also to pay for their crimes. As Magno would make sure of that, as he would be the one to deliver them over there, while Noel and Asta would head back to the Black Bull's base. And also during this time, if you guys are wondering, yes, Nero is there with Asta, as she does end up getting the magic stone that was there at the village. Before then, once again, meeting up with Asta and everything, and just being there to annoy him, but also to keep an eye on him. As afterwards, the rest of the events continue on exactly as they do in the main timeline, until eventually we will then move towards the very next arc, this being the dungeon exploration arc, as we will now turn towards it.
So now, starting off the events that happened during this arc, we will now begin with the very first part of it, as you'll see a dungeon then sprout out of the ground out of nowhere, which will be discovered by a young villager. Now during this time, while Asta will be back at the Black Bull's base and he'll be enjoying himself, this is when suddenly Yami would then actually talk to Asta and letting him know that he's gotten a new mission, this one specifically requested by the Wizard King. Now this would surprise everyone, especially Asta, but still nonetheless he would agree to take the mission, as accompanying him would be the exact same team as it was in the main timeline, with it being Noel, Luck, and himself. And also Nero if you want to include her too. Now during this time, as we see the group go into the dungeon, we will see things continue to play out almost exactly as it does in the main timeline, with Luck deciding to play a little bit of a game with Noel and Asta as he begins to activate as many traps as possible in order to see Asta's anti-magic blade cut through them, as he was trying to gauge Asta's strength, as he would be quite surprised to see that Asta would be able to deal with all of this with little to no difficulty. In fact, he was not even breaking a sweat. Now this would obviously impress Luck, but as he was doing this is when suddenly he would then dash off, as he sensed someone that was really strong that he wanted to fight with. Meanwhile, Asta and Noel would just be there by themselves until Noel would then accidentally fall into a trap, causing Asta to have no choice but to rescue her. As just as he was about to do so, this is when Yuno and the Golden Dawn team would arrive, saving her themselves. As from this point on, we will see things continue to play out similar to that of the main timeline, as we end up seeing no real changes from this point on, as the only real changes end up happening way later on, when Asta and his group finally decide to head off to the treasure room after saving Luck. As now, doing a quick change of scenes, we will now turn to see Yuno as he'll be facing off against Mars, and more precisely, he'll be on his last legs, as unfortunately for Yuno, he was not there yet to completely be able to beat Mars, as he was very close to losing. And as he prepared a final counterattack as Mars decided to finish off Yuno, this is when suddenly Asta would then intervene, as he would appear like in a black flash basically, if you get the reference, as he would appear right in front of Yuno and actually immediately destroyed the mineral sword that was heading towards his brother. As afterwards he would then land right in front of Yuno while Noel and Luck decide to check on Klaus and Mimosa. Now Yuno, seeing Asta, tries to tell him that he didn't need his help and tries to play it off, but to his surprise though, Asta wasn't actually, even talking to Yuno, and instead he was completely focused on Mars. As by this point now, Asta had locked in, he was like in a battle mode basically. As without any hesitation, this is where we will then see Asta as he proceeds to then step up towards Mars, as he will stare him down, not at all being afraid of him, even though Mars was exerting a large amount of magic energy, ones that was felt by all, Klaus, Mimosa, and basically the rest of the Magic Knights there. But yet, Asta, he couldn't sense it at all, and even if he did, he wouldn't care any less. As this is when he would then tell Mars straight up that he was gonna beat him up. And Mars, hearing this, then tells Asta that he has no time for him, as he tries to, send him flying with a mineral blade, only to then be surprised as Asta would then suddenly punch the mineral blade. Without the anti-magic blade or anything, he just punched it with brute force, and that thing would just shatter. As this will surprise Mars and causing him to take a leap back, as he will summon a bunch of mineral clones that will be immediately surrounding Asta. Now seeing this will cause both Luck and Noel to then get worried as they try to rush towards Asta, only for Asta to then raise a hand telling them to stand down. As he tells them to focus purely on Mimosa and Klaus, as right now all he wants to do is deal with Mars himself, and he didn't want anyone else to get involved. As just like that, this is where the fight between both Asta and Mars would then truly begin. As kicking off the fight, we would immediately see all the mineral clones then rush at Asta as they intend on beating him up, only for Asta to then do something surprising as he would then throw the Demon Slayer sword in his hand directly at the mineral clones, causing everyone to look at him as if he was stupid, but then to be surprised. as Asta had chucked it like a boomerang, and surprisingly enough, the Demon Slayer sword would act exactly just like that. As it begins to spin rapidly, gaining momentum after it was thrown, as it begins to actually spin around Asta while also destroying the mineral clones surrounding him. As this would cause Mars and everyone to look on in complete surprise, all the while Asta would just be calmly walking towards Mars. As eventually, after all the mineral clones were then destroyed, Asta would then suddenly reach out his hand, stopping the Demon Slayer sword from spinning, as he does this so effortlessly that it causes Mars to be caught off guard. But that was not the only thing. As right after saying that Mars had let his guard down, this is when suddenly Asta would then capitalize on it, as he disappears before suddenly appearing right before Mars and then slamming him hard in the gut with the anti-magic blade. As Mars could feel blood then suddenly shooting out from his mouth, as he would then be sent flying and crashing into the walls of the dungeon. As everyone would look on in complete shock, with Klaus analyzing all of this and not understanding, as he couldn't believe that a commoner could possess such strength and was able to deal with someone like Mars as if he was nothing, meanwhile him, a member of the Golden Dawn and also a royal, couldn't do so. As currently right now in Klaus's mind, Asta was an anomaly that he couldn't figure out, and that terrified him. As he just continued looking on in pure amazement, meanwhile back in the fight, we will see Asta, as by this point now, he sees Mars get up once again, as Mars ends up creating a ginormous mineral armor as he stands over Asta like a titan. As he would tell Asta that he wouldn't lose to him, and that Asta was destined to fall at his feet. Meanwhile, Asta would show no care for this whatsoever, and instead he would actually gather all the anti-magic in his blade, and he begins to transfer it directly into his body. As this is where we will then see Asta take a deep breath and close his eyes, causing Noelle to then get reminded about what happened back in Magma's village, and causing her to tense as she knows that she's going to feel a tremendous amount of pressure just like last time. And while Asta would be doing this is when Mars would then take this opportunity to summon out a ginormous mineral blade, intending on finishing off Asta here and now. As he will send it directly towards Asta, intending on ending his life, only to then be surprised. As while Asta was in the midst of concentrating, this is when suddenly he would then calmly open his eyes, as we will feel this pressure once again that begins to envelop the entire area. As Asta would calmly stare down at the mineral blade approaching, as this is when suddenly his arm, more precisely the arm that was holding the Demon Slayer sword, would then suddenly gain a black and red armor like on top of it basically, as it just formed out of existence, surprising everyone, as they will see this armored arm eclipse Asta's arm, as he would very calmly then swing his sword downwards, causing a ginormous anti-magic slash to then appear, as it will be sent flying directly towards Mars, easily cutting through the mineral blade as if it were butter, before suddenly cutting through the Titan armor and eventually hitting Mars directly across his chest, causing everyone to look on in complete shock, as it was basically the same thing that Asta had done to Sekke in the Magic Knight entrance exams, but multiple times stronger. As Mars could do nothing more but watch on in shock, as he would cough up blood before getting sent flying and crashing into the walls of the dungeon once again, but this time he was truly down for good. As everyone that was watching would look on in complete shock, especially as he couldn't believe the amount of power that Asta had within him, and he also couldn't believe that transformation, as he looks at Asta's arm and sees the black and red armor, wondering how exactly Asta learned how to do that, and also wondering what type of spell or whatever that thing really is. Meanwhile, for Asta, he would just calmly finally let go of the deep breath he was holding, as suddenly the armor would then crumble and then release itself, turning back into pure anti-magic energy before once again getting absorbed back into the sword, or more precisely into Asta. As now with Mars defeated and the Golden Dawn team now saved, this is where we're now able to move on from this arc. As turning to the rest of the events that end up happening here, we will see things continue to play out exactly as it does on the main timeline, as the only real difference here being the fact that Mars did not get up after the beating that Asta had laid out on him, and also was the fact that Asta had to find the Demon Dweller sword, but in an entirely different way. As basically during the time of him exploring the dungeon, he felt a tremendous urge to actually break down one of the walls there, which surprised everyone, only for Asta to then find the Demon Dweller sword. Now he was confused why he was drawn to it, but still nonetheless, the sword was then added into his grimoire, causing Asta to now have two of the blades now. As now that he had that, he was more than confident about his growing strength, as afterwards we will then see the team then leave the dungeon right as it was collapsing. And obviously Mars had also gone away thanks to his allies back in the Spade Kingdom. As now with these events taken care of, this is where we're now able to turn to the events that happen at the royal capital, as we will now turn to the next day. Now, turning to the next day, we would now turn to see both Asta and Noelle as they'll be heading off to the Clover Kingdom in order to give a report on the mission that they did at the dungeon. Now, along the way there, as they were walking, they will then eventually meet the Golden Dawn team as they have a little bit of a reunion, with things going almost exactly as it does in the main timeline, until eventually they end up arriving at the Wizard King's castle. Now, during the time when they're there, they end up getting introduced to the Wizard King, Julius, who ends up immediately getting very fascinated with the things they found. But the one thing he also gets very interested in is, while yes, it was Yuno's spear, but also Asta's anti-magic blade. Now, when Asta ends up showing off the anti-magic blade and everything, Julius would then take note of the fact that Asta seems to have unparalleled strength. This being the fact that Asta would be able to easily just pick up the blade that even he, the Wizard King, was struggling to lift up as if it were nothing, as if it was like paper mache. As this will cause him to be very much impressed with Asta before he would then invite Asta and the rest of his friends to then come join him at the banquet. As we will now turn to the events that happen there. So turning to the banquet, we will see Asta and the rest of his friends all gather up in the area, along with the rest of the Magic Knights that were there due to an award ceremony, as they were getting blessed at the banquet obviously. Now during that time there, we will see Asta doing the same thing that he does in the main timeline, just feasting, enjoying himself, until suddenly all that would then be interrupted by a loud scream. As turning to the direction, we will then see Noelle, as by this point she'll begin getting picked on by Solid, her older brother, who decides to actually drop a large amount of water on her head, causing her to then be embarrassed, as the rest of the Magic Knights will just look on at her as she begins to feel embarrassed, as her pride has been extremely damaged by this, as she tries to end up leaving, only for Asta to then hold her there, as he tells her not to run away from them, as he tells her straight up that she shouldn't show fear to these cowards. And this would immediately piss off Solid, but not only Solid but also the vice captain of the Golden Dawn, who decides to make his presence known, as he ends up immediately trapping Asta in a sand armor, telling Asta that he should humble himself and that he had no right to even speak of royalty like that. Meanwhile, Solid decides to go ahead and immediately, charge up an attack, telling the vice captain that he was being way too soft on Asta and that he should learn his place. Meanwhile, Asta would just be there staring at both of them, as by this point now, he had already locked in. He didn't really care about anything else, as he's now treating this like a battle, as after all, they were the one who initiated everything first, so what happened next, no one can blame him. As right as Solid would launch the attack at Asta, this is when suddenly, to the surprise of everyone, Asta ends up breaking out of the sand armor, but not with anti-magic, no, he does it with pure strength, surprising the vice captain of the Golden Dawn, before suddenly Asta would then summon out the Demon Slayer sword, as he ends up bouncing the attack right back at Solid. But just like how he did with Magma, that attack got so much of a power boost from Asta hitting it back again, that it was enough to turn the attack into an actual bomb. As right before Solid's eyes, this is when he would then try forming a barrier out of water, but unfortunately even that was not enough, as suddenly a large explosion would then shake up the entirety of the banquet area, causing everyone to gasp, as Solid would then be sent flying and crashing into the walls, as he ends up getting knocked into unconsciousness, as this will cause everyone watching to then be there remaining in stunned silence. Meanwhile, Asta would just casually shrug off like everything that just happened, acting as if he had done nothing in the first place. As right after getting off the table and everything and walking back to his friends, this is when Asta would then let everyone know about his true intentions here, as he would tell everyone straight up that Solid was no real Magic Knight, and that he himself was working as a Magic Knight so that way he could become the Wizard King, so that way he could protect people, regardless of wealth or fame. As this response from Asta causes everyone to once again be stunned, as he casually continues walking back to his friends until a pressure then sets in, as this is when Noelle would then begin to get up, as he tells Asta that it is his turn now. As approaching Asta while increasing the pressure, this is when Noelle then tells Asta that he has no class whatsoever, and that commoners such as him shouldn't even be allowed to be within their ranks. But Asta, hearing this, instead of being intimidated like he was in the main timeline, this time around, to the surprise of Asta's friends who were seeing his expression, Asta would then lock in once again. As right as Noelle was approaching Asta and getting closer, this is when suddenly, to everyone's surprise, Asta would then vanish, as this would catch everyone off guard, including Noelle, before suddenly he would then feel a sharp pain in his gut, as he then gets pushed back multiple feet all the way to the very end of the banquet hall, as he ends up finally collapsing down onto the ground on his knees, throwing up whatever he had just ate. As suddenly like that, this is where he would then look up, only to see Asta, who was very casually staring down at him as he was holding his fist up in the air, to reveal that he had actually been the one to punch him in the stomach in such a short amount of time. But I couldn't even see him or sense him. This boy, just what the hell is he? As for the first time in a while, Nozel had felt truly intimidated by someone, as he realized very quickly that had Asta decided to use like lethal force in that moment, there would be nothing stopping him, as Nozel couldn't even keep track of Asta's movement, and he didn't even sense where Asta was going to attack. As this immediately caused the captain of the Silver Eagles to then immediately break out into a cold sweat. As Asta will continue staring down Nozel, waiting for him to make his move, as he already prepares to continue fighting him, this is when Fuegoleon would then intervene, putting an end to all the events, as not only does he humble Nozel, Solid, and the vice captain of the Golden Dawn, but he also scolds Asta for his actions. And Asta actually getting scolded by someone like that, and the fact that he was getting properly scolded, not just you're wrong because you're wrong, actually caused Asta to then suddenly begin to feel, embarrassed about what he'd done, but he didn't really regret it too much, considering the fact that all he was trying to do at the moment was just trying to look out for his friend. But still, nonetheless, this wasn't enough to cause things to settle down, as Asta would then head back to his friends, pick up a plate and just ate, but this time around he's not really talking to anyone, as rather of fact he has a lot on his mind right now and didn't really want to speak to anyone at the moment, even though his friends were pestering him. Meanwhile, looking at them a fair distance away, we will see Nozel, who was still on the ground, staring at Asta in just complete shock, while Fuegoleon would then approach him. As looking at his rival on the ground, Fuegoleon would then turn to Asta, as he already begins to make a mental note of Asta's strength. As he didn't get to see the full exchange head on, but he did end up seeing Asta, appear before Nozel, and Nozel being on the ground. So that was enough to cause Fuegoleon to then realize that Asta himself was way stronger than he looked. And Fuegoleon would actually share these thoughts with Nozel, letting him know that from now on they shouldn't underestimate that boy. As Nozel could do nothing more but shakily nod his head, as from this moment, unknowing to Asta was the fact that two people had their eye on him, as he had actually unknowingly gained two more rivals along with Yuno when it came to the title of being the Wizard King. But still, nonetheless, now with these events taken care of, we will see the banquet continue to proceed exactly as it does in the main timeline, although things were a little bit more tense here and there. But other than that, things continue to play out until eventually flames begin to erupt throughout the Clover Kingdom. As suddenly bursting into the banquet, this is when suddenly one of the soldiers that were there would then inform the entirety of the Magic Knights that the kingdom was under attack. As this is where we will now maneuver into the royal capital assault. So to begin these events, we will now turn to Asta, as immediately after hearing that the capital was under attack, Asta without any hesitation would then rush out of the banquet hall to then go help the civilians. As this would surprise everyone that was looking, as they all thought that it was quite foolish of him, only to then see that Leopold, who decided to announce that Asta was his rival, and Noel would then suddenly chase after him, as they decided to back him up, or better yet to just compete with him, this being more on the Leopold side. As while this was happening, we would of course see the Magic Knight captains and the rest of the Magic Knights decide to make a plan. Meanwhile, turning to Asta, we would now see him in action. Immediately, without any hesitation, we will see Asta, thanks to his enhanced speed and strength, would be easily able to maneuver throughout the entirety of the Clover Kingdom extremely quickly, knocking out any of the undead that were approaching the civilians and also getting them to safety. As this would cause many of them to be surprised, as it would happen too fast for many of them to even react, as Asta was basically working overtime to try helping out the civilians of the Clover Kingdom. However, while doing this is when suddenly Asta would then pick up a noise, as thanks to his enhanced hearing because of his Viltrumite genes, Asta will be able to hear Rades as he begins to announce his plan to a young girl who is terrified. As Asta, after hearing all this, would then suddenly lock in, as using his enhanced speed, he would then speed blitz to the location where Rades was at. As he will see Rades towering over the young girl, attempting to attack her, only for Asta to then intercept it, as he would appear right before Rades before landing him with the most powerful punch that he has ever felt in his entire life, as Rades' entire body couldn't withstand that punch, as he would be knocked into unconsciousness before getting sent flying through multiple structures of the Clover Kingdom. Meanwhile, Asta would just be there looking at Rades with a fierce glare, as he ends up vowing mentally that Rades was going to pay for all this after, all this was over. But still, nonetheless, Asta had actually stopped Rades from doing anything else, and thanks to him knocking him unconscious, this would actually stop a majority of the assault on the royal capital, since the undead could no longer move due to Rades being unconscious. So now with Rades taken care of, this is where we will begin to see things settle down, as Leopold as well as Noel would then also rush to the location to see Asta, only to find that he had taken care of the main guy behind it all. As they will be most definitely surprised by it, but still nonetheless they decide to, help out Asta with restraining Rades, considering the fact that Asta didn't really have any rope or anything to stop him from running away if he wakes up. And while they will be doing this is when Fuegoleon would then arrive, as he sees that everything has already been taken care of by this point and would be firmly impressed with Asta, considering the fact that it's already shown that Asta was very much competent when it came to being a Magic Knight, as he already sees Asta as a true rival when it comes to contending for the Wizard King title, as he would have very large amount of respect for him immediately right off the gate. However, right as he was about to approach Radius and about to take him into, into prison, this is when suddenly a portal then opens up, surprising everyone except for Asta, who actually ends up catching notice of it much quicker than everyone else and also is able to react to it. As right before Fuegoleon would then fall into the portal, Asta would then suddenly summon out the Demon Dweller sword, as he then chucks it like a spear, as it would then suddenly stab into the portal, stopping it from activating and completely just like shutting it down. As this will cause Fuegoleon to, still be there with them, as Asta begins to look around until eventually he ends up finding the person behind it. As even though they're trying their best to hide and cover their breathing and everything, Asta could hear them perfectly well, thanks to his enhanced senses. As suddenly walking over to the Demon Dweller sword, Asta would then casually pick it up before suddenly bum rushing into a pile of undead that was beside him. As suddenly the man that was inside the pile of undead would then suddenly jump out, as he realized that if he were to get caught up in the attack, that he would most definitely, be knocked unconscious due to it. As now with the unknown enemy revealed, this is where we will then see Asta as well as the rest of his group then look up to see none other than Voltos, who ends up making his presence known now fully, removing the disguise and everything, as he will then tell Fuegoleon that his leader has an important discussion that he needs to have with him, as he attempts to portal away Fuegoleon once again, only for Asta to intervene, as he ends up cutting through the portal once again, causing Voltos to then be pissed, as he tries activating more portals, only for Asta to then completely shut them down. As surprisingly enough, Asta would continue doing this, as it seems as if he's able to know exactly when that portal is going to appear and where is it going to appear. As annoyingly to Asta, due to the fact of his Viltrumite DNA and due to the fact how they're basically like natural warriors and everything, this would actually cause Asta to then actually unknowingly begin to already adapt the idea of ki in his mind. He's basically able to sense exactly what Voltos is going to do, and he's able to react to it accordingly. But the only thing is he's not able to control it. He's going based purely on instinct, nothing else. So due to that, he's not exactly fully knowing what he's doing just yet, but he's just basically going with the feeling, and that's actually extremely useful at this very moment. As Fuegoleon also realizing exactly what Voltos intended to do, this is when he would then use his flame magic to then not only easily knock out Voltos, but also to restrain him. As now that he along with Radius were now taken care of, this is where we will then see the end of the Royal Capital assault. As skimming forward with the rest of the events, we will see things continue on exactly as it does in the main timeline, as right after all the Magic Knights once again, regather, helping out the civilians and basically making sure that everything was alright, they will then eventually end up having a little bit of a meeting with the Wizard King, who ends up informing them about the Eye of the Midnight Sun, giving them the full name and also a little bit of information about their leader, about how he's a light mage and all. As this will cause all of them to feel a little bit, extremely tense about everything that's going on, but this is when Julius once again reassures them that at the end of the day, the Clover Kingdom would win. As this will cause all the Magic Knights to once again get very motivated, as afterwards we will then see Asta along with his group then leave to then go back to the Black Bulls. As now with the events of the Royal Capital itself coming to an end, this is where we're now able to maneuver into the next arc, this being the Eye of the Midnight Sun arc. As we will now do a little bit of a time skip. So now flashing forward to a whole week going by following the events that happened at the Royal Capital, we will now turn to see Asta once again, as by this point now he has been just keeping up with his training and hanging out with his friends, nothing too crazy. But during this point, this is where he would then get invited by Finral to then go to a mixer along with Luck, to which Asta would obviously accept, as we will see things play out similar to the main timeline from this point on. Asta would eventually end up meeting Rebecca, who at first wouldn't really rock with him or really anyone there, but eventually does so after getting to know him. And then afterwards, we will then see, Asta then decides to hang out with her and her siblings, as he ends up going there to her village, and eventually ends up even meeting Marie, which he finds out is Gauche's little sister. Afterwards, we will see things just continue on all the way until nightfall, as Asta continues staying there and just hanging out with Rebecca, and even deciding to stay over at her place. However, while he was trying to go to sleep, this is when he would then get attacked by Gauche, and while these two begin struggling against each other, this is when Rebecca would then run out the house, as she would then tell Asta that her siblings had gone missing. Now this would immediately cause Asta to be surprised, as he would then lock in, and this is when suddenly everyone in the town then begins to walk out, informing Asta about their children missing, or their siblings missing. as hearing about all these children missing would cause Asta, as well as Gauche, and even Noelle, who had been secretly spying on Asta this entire time, to all be surprised by all of this. As eventually, this is when Sister Teresa would also end up walking up, as she ends up informing that even the kids at the church had also been missing, which causes Gauche to then get incredibly angry. But before he can get into a fight with Sister Teresa, this is when suddenly Asta will then slap his hand away from her, as he then tells Gauche that they don't got time for that. As unfortunately right now, by this point, Asta has fully decided that he is fully time for them to help the kids out, and he had no time to play around with like antics or anything like that. There are times to goof off, but right now it really wasn't those times. And Gauche was getting extremely pissed off at Asta, but this is when he would then be surprised as Asta wasn't his normal goofy self, as this was the first time that Gauche saw him like really lock in. As Asta would then ask Sister Teresa if she can actually, tell exactly where they may have gone, and she actually tells Asta that she could. As after hearing this is where the rescue mission would then begin, as we see Asta, Gauche, and Sister Teresa all head off to go rescue the children. Meanwhile, Noelle would then stay behind at the village in order to protect the people and also to call reinforcements. Now, turning to the next couple of moments I'll go by as these guys go on the rescue mission for the children, we will see things begin to play out once again similar to the main timeline, as they eventually do find Rebecca's sibling, and after some encouraging words from Asta and also thanks to Sister Teresa helping him out, they were able to convince the child to stay there and help them out when it comes to rescuing the rest of the children. As he will decide to stay there to help the kids in any way that he can. Meanwhile, Asta, Sister Teresa, and Gauche would all head off into the cave to save the rest of the children, which Gauche had done so way earlier on compared to Sister Teresa and Asta. And by that, I mean he mostly went there to save Marie. Like I said, most of these events end up playing out exactly, as Gauche would just be there going on a rampage and trying to harm those that hurt his Marie. Meanwhile, Asta and also Sister Teresa would be there trying to save the children. Now, while they were doing this is when Sister Teresa then informs Asta about their magic being completely taken away from them. And by them, I mean the ones that were, that didn't have any magic anymore. And hearing this would cause Asta to be pissed off, more than he's ever felt in his entire life. As Barrow, who had been the main person behind all of this, would then turn and look at Asta, and realizing that he didn't have any magic, begins to think that they may actually have a chance. However, those thoughts would then be interrupted, as suddenly all he could see would be a black blur. As in the very next second, all you could hear is a loud piercing sound going through right beside him. As legitimately, the fight would then stop between Gauche and Nij, as they can do nothing more but stare at the scene in complete shock. As legit, the entirety of the area has grown tense as they turn to see what just happened. Asta had somehow, someway, in the very time that he'd been talking to Sister Teresa and finding out the information, and at the very time as Barrow was evaluating his skill, Asta had summoned out the Demon Slayer sword, the bulkiest sword ever, and had chucked that thing like a spear. And he had chucked it with so much force that thing was able to easily pierce through the very wall of this ginormous cave like it was nothing. Mind you, that thing was not sharp and it wasn't even able to cut things normally, but Asta had managed to turn that thing into a legitimate spear that was able to pierce through a cave wall. That was shocking to everyone. And enough so that it actually caused a ginormous crack to appear on the wall besides Barrow, as he realized that if that thing had hit him, he would have died. And Asta would make that very clear as he would approach Barrow silently, not even looking at him, before suddenly getting right up into his face, showing him a very nasty glare. As he tells Barrow that he should be grateful, thanking the heavens themselves that he was a good person. Because if Asta truly had no morals and didn't really care whether a person lived or died, let's just say Barrow wouldn't be living right now at this very moment. As Barrow realizing the situation that he was in, he would then immediately surrender, not wanting to forfeit his life. As Asta seeing this would just simply agree with him and saying that was a good choice on his part, as this is when he would then tell Gauche to restrain him. Now Gauche hearing this tries to call out Asta, telling him that he shouldn't be ordering him around, but the fierce glare that Asta gives him causes Gauche to then immediately, do so reluctantly, as he actually begins to imagine Asta as a tiny but still menacing version of Yami for a moment. As Asta was now in an extremely pissed off mood after hearing what happened, as he retrieves the Demon Slayer sword, as he can't help but imagine what those children are going to go through in the future, even remembering old memories of himself back when he wasn't as strong as he is now. But still nonetheless, now that they captured them, he knows for sure that these guys were going to face justice. But for right now, Asta wanted to do nothing more but to get the kids back to their parents, and also maybe find a way to get them back their magic. And as Asta begins to try to think of this is when suddenly a portal would then open up, as suddenly someone would then slip in. as suddenly sensing a presence nearby. This will cause Asta's instincts to then go haywire, as suddenly moving so fast that no one else could react, Asta would then swing the Demon Slayer sword and deflect a light spirit that was heading directly towards Baru's chest, as Asta has saved him right in the nick of time, as he would then look up shakily, as suddenly casually floating right in front of him and everyone else will be none other than Licht, the leader of the Eye of the Midnight Sun. As he will be looking at Asta with a calm expression, but you could tell that he was annoyed that Asta was able to easily deflect his attack. Very particular. I didn't expect you to be able to deflect that. Oh well, it doesn't really matter. You along with everyone else won't be leaving here alive. He will tell this calmly as he will begin to send out a parade of light spears, each one of them heading off into a specific direction, with also realizing that Licht was actually targeting Sister Teresa, who was now getting the final children out of the cave. As without any hesitation, Asta ends up appearing right before her and deflecting the attack with all his might. Meanwhile, the rest of them that were also attacked could only barely just dodge out the way, but still getting hurt nonetheless, as they feel an intense burn from the attack that Licht had released. As Licht would sigh at Asta deflecting the attack once again, as he begins to feel himself get a little bit annoyed, but still nonetheless it didn't matter, as he already could feel guaranteed that victory was his, as he was making sure that these guys were especially going to pay for everything they've done, and especially Asta, since he heard about what happened to Radius and Valtos. Realizing that he lost two of the much more valuable pieces in his entire forces was enough to cause Licht to be extremely annoyed with him and realize that he was a threat, which is why he was here at this very moment after finding out that he was the one intervening once again. As he begins to casually levitate down, staring at Asta and the rest of them with a calm expression, this is when, to his surprise, he could only barely dodge out of the way of an anti-magic blade that was heading towards him like a spear, as that thing would then stab directly into the wall right behind Licht, as he realized that had that attack hit him, just like Baru, that thing would have killed him. As now turning to Asta, we will see him now extremely pissed off, as by this point now, he fully understands that this guy is the leader of the Eye of the Midnight Sun. But what he couldn't believe was the fact that this guy, not only did he openly try to kill his own comrades, the ones that were doing the dirty work for him, but he also decides to attack his own comrades as well. I'm talking about Asta's comrades. As he couldn't believe that this guy here had no morals whatsoever and would attack anyone that he considered in his way, as that was enough to cause Asta to immediately have a strong dislike for this guy, as he was more than willing to make this guy pay, and he would do exactly that. As he begins to approach Licht uncaringly without any hesitation, as he brings out the other anti-magic blade. As without any real warning or anything, he would then order everyone to leave, as he told that to everyone, Baru, Nej, Sister Teresa, and Ghosh, as he didn't care who or any of them, of their comrades or enemies, he told them to leave this area right now, as he was going to face Licht head on. Now hearing this, Sister Teresa and Ghosh try to argue, but Asta wasn't hearing none of it. He orders them once again to leave, as with no other choice they decide to do so, although reluctantly. Baru and Nej would also do so, although they end up getting restrained by Ghosh, who ends up taking them due to the fact that he didn't want them getting anywhere near his Marie, obviously. You know, it wasn't because Asta told him to. As now that these guys were gone, this would allow Asta and Licht to then begin their fight, with Licht actually telling Asta that it didn't matter if those guys were to leave, as after all, once everything is over with, he could just hunt them down. But Asta, after hearing this, would then tell him that he has to get through him first, which caused Licht to actually let out a chuckle, as he would then suddenly chuck another light spear at Asta, expecting him not to be able to counter it like he's been doing this entire time. But once again, reality proves to be a disappointment, as just like that, Asta ends up deflecting the attack once again, as he would then suddenly bum rush Licht, and Licht would actually be caught off guard by Asta's speed, as he has to dodge out the way of a slash that was approaching his face. As Asta then tells Licht that he won't let him get away with this, with Licht then cursing as he then summons out a ginormous light blade as he tries to slash Asta across the chest. But Asta fortunately is able to dodge out the way just in time, thanks to his enhanced speed. As just like that, we will then see Asta and Licht once again get into a battle stance, as now this is where the true fight between them would then really begin. So to start off the fight, we will now see both Licht and Asta as they will then rush at each other before then clashing with their respective weapons, as they will get into a brief stalemate before then separating from each other, as afterwards Licht would then summon a parade of light spears to hit Asta, to which him seeing all these light spears heading towards him, he would then deflect them all while remaining in the same spot that he was before. As Licht seeing this would then think that he had Asta stuck, as for the next few moments he would then relentlessly attack Asta, sending out a bunch of light spears or like light magic based attacks towards Asta, who would just remain there unmoving, blocking every last one of them or deflecting them. As Licht in his mind, he begins to think that he could potentially wear down Asta, as even though he was confused as to how he's able to block all his attacks, he knew for sure that Asta couldn't keep this up forever. However, right as he was in the midst of thinking this though, as he would then gather another large amount of magic to create another attacking spell, to his surprise, right in that instant, Asta would then appear right in front of him, as he would then hit him with so much force that it would knock the wind out of him, as he would then be sent cratering into a wall. As Licht, feeling the impact from the attack, could do nothing more but just be there feeling completely stunned. As Asta would then approach him silently before then staring him down, as he would then reveal the entirety of his strategy. As truth be told, Asta wasn't just simply remaining in the same spot just so that way he could deflect the attacks or because he was stuck or anything like that. No, instead it was actually just Asta, as truth be told he had been keeping track of Licht's attack pattern, as he had been studying all his movements, trying to find out how fast his attacks get to him, and also trying to find out how long it takes for him to gather the energy for those attacks. As Asta had been calculating and memorizing everything until he eventually found his opening, which was this very moment right here. As Licht, hearing Asta's explanation, couldn't believe it, as he would then shakily call out to Asta, letting him know that that was impossible, especially for someone so young. As what Asta just described was only he could only believe that was possible if someone was like a veteran or like a true warrior and stuff like that. Asta was still basically a teenager, there was no way he should be able to do that. But Asta didn't hear any of that, as instead he calmly stared down at Licht, as Licht actually felt true fear at this very moment right here. As Asta tells him that he was going to make sure that he faces punishment for everything that he had committed, as he remembered about the Royal Capital assault and also about this very moment right here. As he was going to make sure that Licht didn't get away with it, but right before Asta can take him in for justice, this is when suddenly a portal would then open up, as 3 individuals would then bum rush Asta. As Asta would then turn to them as he tries to, deflect their attacks or to block it, this is when another portal would then open up as Yami would then arrive, along with the rest of the captains. As from this moment on, we will then see the rest of the events of this arc then play out similar to the main timeline, as we will see a battle between the Eye of the Midnight Sun and the Magic Knights. As a brief battle would then happen between the two groups before eventually the Eye of the Midnight Sun would then end up escaping while taking Licht with them, as they end up swearing vengeance against the Magic Knights, with them making sure to swear vengeance against Asta especially, as they did not forget the fact that he was the one that knocked out their leader in the first place, as they all made sure to look at him with a glare before then finally leaving, as the rest of the Magic Knights could do nothing more but curse at their chance of capturing them. But still, nonetheless, now with these events taken care of, this is where we can now do another time skip. So now flashing forward to a whole day after the events that transpired, we will now turn to see Asta once again. As by this point now, he had returned back to the Clover Kingdom after making sure that all the kids were safe in order to give his report to Julius. Now during this time, Asta would give his report and things would go smoothly as they will continue following the exact line as it did in the main timeline, with Asta, giving Julius a report, then afterwards actually helping out Julius when it comes to uncovering the traitor that was among the Magic Knight captains, as it turns out to be the captains of the Purple Orcas. But still nonetheless, after Asta ends up doing this is when Julius then informs both Asta and Yami about a mission to go to the Seabed Temple, as he realized the true objective of the Eye of the Midnight Sun was to collect the magic stones, so they need to make sure to collect them all first before they get their hands on it. As Asta and the rest of the Black Bulls would agree to this obviously, as afterwards we will then see them go to the beachside area where the mission site would actually take place. As after arriving there and getting into a little bit of shenanigans, they'll eventually end up preparing for it, with Noelle doing most of the heavy lifting on her part, as she has to train to use a spell to get to the Seabed Temple, with Asta being there to help her out, to which ends up going exactly as it did in the main timeline even then, with them even meeting Kaono, who ends up befriending the two of them and even helping Noelle when it comes to learning her magic. As after all this is taken care of, and as the Black Bulls end up eventually getting to the Seabed Temple, they eventually end up meeting the master of the temple, who ends up challenging them to a game, to which they obviously end up accepting. As while in the midst of their little game, and as they go through a bunch of trials, facing off against a bunch of enemies, this is when, to the surprise of everyone, the games would then be interrupted. As during the time when Asta was facing off against one of the people at the dungeon, this is when suddenly the entirety of the temple would then shake. As we would then suddenly see, looking outside, we will see Vetto and the rest of his men as they have arrived here to collect the magic stone. as this would immediately shock, the temple master and Yami as they try to go help out, their, students or, their squad, I'm talking about both of them respectively. Unfortunately, they didn't realize that they can't get out because of the rulings when it comes to the temple's master's magic, as this will cause Yami to be extremely frustrated. Meanwhile, inside the temple, we will see a growing battle then rage on, as we see the Black Bulls, every last one of them individually then try to take on Veto, but failing horribly. With the only person that was surprisingly missing during this point would be Asta, as unlike in the main timeline where he appeared in an instant, Asta wasn't there during this point, as it was left up to mostly Magma and Luck, and even Noelle to actually pitch in, with Finral and also Vanessa arriving there as well, as they'll be doing all their efforts that they could to put a stop to Veto, which turns out to be pointless, as even though both Magma and Luck were able to land a powerful blow on him, unfortunately it used up all their magic reserves, which caused them to be knocked unconscious. And when it came to Noelle, she did release her Sea Dragon's Roar, but unfortunately Veto was able to tank it and actually grow stronger due to it. As needless to say, it was turning into a hopeless battle, even with Kawano and the rest of the people in the dungeon trying to help out. And just as things were about to get even worse, this is when finally, after such a long time of who knows where he's been, Asta would finally end up arriving, as he would end up touching down at the battlefield, as he ends up arriving there silently, not looking at anyone, not even speaking, not making a grand entrance. No, Asta was completely silent. And seeing Asta's arrival, this would cause the rest of the Black Bulls to actually cheer, or the rest of them that were conscious to be cheering, as now with Asta here, they have an even better chance. But this is when Asta then tells them to leave the rest up to him, as by this point now he was in no mood to play any games. Now Veto, seeing Asta's arrival, would immediately begin remembering what he did to Licht and begins chuckling, letting Asta know that he will make sure that he takes true despair and dies for what he did to Licht. As he begins laughing at the idea about what he's going to do to Asta though, this is when, to Veto's surprise, in a split instant, Asta would then appear before him and then punch him in the face, with Asta's punch having so much force that actually sent Veto out of the temple, as he ends up crash landing directly outside of the temple, causing the rest of the civilians that were watching to look on in complete shock and also terror as they back away. As Veto would be, a little bit dazed from the punch, as Asta would just casually jump out of the temple as he begins to approach him calmly. And the surprising thing is, Asta will be doing this without even using his anti-magic blades. As Veto, seeing Asta approaching, would then grow angry as he summons out a beast claw, rushing at Asta to throw a punch, only to be surprised as when he throws a punch, Asta casually ends up catching it with one hand, and when he does so, he's not at all affected by the the beast magic that he was using, as even though that magic was supposed to basically incinerate Asta's bones, making them, making Asta go through a tremendous amount of pain, Asta showed little to no reaction to it at all. As in fact, with a cold look on his face, this is where we will then see Asta as he very casually ends up breaking Veto's wrist, causing Veto to grit his teeth before suddenly Asta would then pull him in and then headbutt him in the face, causing Veto to then be sent flying as his nose would be broken. As he ends up actually crouching on the ground now by this point, getting extremely pissed off, this is when he would then turn back to Asta only to get hit in the face once again. And then again, and then again, and again, and again. It begins to grow extremely horrifying to everyone watching as they look at Asta as he just continuously pummels this man over and over again. And while he does so, you could hear Asta muttering, asking him a bunch of questions, like whether or not he enjoys the pain, if he was having fun, or if he was enjoying the feeling of despair that Asta was giving him. As in Veto's POV, this will be horrifying to see as he could do nothing more but actually just take the hits that Asta was giving to him, which were growing stronger with each blow that Asta was throwing. As Veto could do nothing more but see the emotionless or blank face of Asta as he continues pummeling him into the ground. As this will go on for quite a while with no one being able to do anything, as they can do nothing more but just stare at Asta as he continues asking Veto the same question over and over, if he was having fun, if he enjoyed the feeling of despair. Meanwhile, Veto, he wasn't there anymore. I'm not gonna lie to you, Asta had completely messed him up, as the only thing that was supposed to be Veto's face was now nothing more but a very disgusting gooey mush. But yet, even though Veto's face was like that, Asta showed no hesitation and really showed no care either, as he would continue doing this over and over again until suddenly he would then feel a hand on his shoulder. As feeling someone touching him, this is when, out of instinct, Asta would then tackle this person to the ground before suddenly bringing his fist up, preparing to do the same thing that he did to Veto to them, only for him to then stop as he realized who this person was. as it will be none other than Yami, who, even though Asta was staring him down, even though Asta had his fist raised up into the air, he would remain calm, as he tells Asta that the fight was over, with Asta then finally beginning to realize what he had done and also what was going on. As he looks around to see the horrified look of all the civilians of the seabed temple, and also he ends up seeing his friends as they also look at him with complete horror, but also with concern, as they'll be staring at him, tense, wondering what he was going to do next, while Asta just tries to come to terms with what he'd done. For the first time ever since the entirety of Asta's existence, he actually felt truly shaken up about something and felt uncertain. As he looked down at himself for a second, as this is when Yami eventually ends up getting up, telling Asta that he should, just stay there for now, as he tells him that he's going to take care of the rest. As Asta could do nothing more but nod his head, as for the first time ever, he wasn't in the mood to start screaming at the top of his lungs or even start shouting how he was going to, not give up. As from this point, this is where we're now going to do a time skip, as we will now flash forward to after the events that happened at the Seabed Temple. And by that I mean when they finally end up leaving that place. Now after the events that happened there, we will see something actually change within Asta, as throughout the entirety of their time there and after they end up leaving, the rest of the Black Bulls have taken notice about the fact that Asta had grown quiet. As legit, after what happened between him and Vetto, Asta barely talked to anyone, or in fact just didn't talk at all. And also not only that, but he didn't even seem to really be looking at them or even be listening to what they said, as Asta had been stuck in his head this entire time, always looking off into someplace else, just wondering and thinking about something that the rest of them probably, already figured out what he was thinking about. As after all, to Asta right now, he was extremely shaken up. He had never done that before. He had never actually taken a life, and for him to do it, it was something that shook him to his core. As after all, he wasn't dumb. He knew that the day that he would become Wizard King, that he would be faced with a decision just like that, where he would have to eventually take someone's life. But the thing is, he knew that by that time he fully believed that by that time he would be fully prepared for it. But at that moment, he didn't feel prepared for it at all. As in fact, Asta felt truly, for the first time ever, he felt truly scared. As he felt scared of himself. Legit, during the time with Vetto, Asta truly felt himself let loose, lose control completely. As legit, all he saw was his friends getting attacked by Vetto, and that was enough for Asta to just snap at that instance. As that caused Asta to truly wonder if he could really trust himself if the time were to ever arrive. And if so, would he go about it as brutal as he did with Vetto? As these thoughts would lay in Asta's mind heavily throughout the entirety of the day. Even with everyone trying to talk to him, make jokes or, make him mad or really trying to do anything to get a reaction out of him, Asta would just be there stoically, just letting the entire day move past him. As once again, this will cause worry throughout the entirety of the Black Bulls, as this will continue on until eventually Yami then decides to bring Asta along with him to then go report back to the Wizard King. As Yami would be there giving the report and everything, with Julius being surprised when he explained about what happened with Asta. As Julius would look at Asta sympathetically and tries talking to him, with Asta listening to the words of the Wizard King since he actually had a tremendous amount of respect for him. And even though Julius would give Asta some pretty good advice, Asta could do nothing more but give a small and awkward smile as he tries to, seem like he was okay with it, but still, you could very much see that he wasn't. But right as these guys were, continue trying to discuss more things about the mission and also about the, magic stones, this is when suddenly Diamond Kingdom mages began attacking the Clover Kingdom. As seeing this immediately without any hesitation, Asta then leaps into action as he then rushes to defend the Clover Kingdom. As this would cause Julius to then smile, but Yami himself, he remains stoic. As he looks at Asta's direction for a moment before sighing, as he then tells Julius that he has something that he needs to take care of before then leaving. As now turning to the moments with Asta, we will now see him as he'll be just wandering throughout the entirety of the Clover Kingdom, as whenever he finds a Diamond Kingdom mage, he would just knock them out. He didn't even bring out his anti-magic blades or anything like that. He just simply punched them and knocked them out, as he had no time for them. As currently right now, Asta would still be thinking, as he was still trying to come to terms with everything that was happening. And even though the Wizard King and the rest of the Black Bulls try to help, Asta was unfortunately still trying to come to a conclusion himself. As he will still be thinking about all this stuff, and as he continues to find more and more Diamond Kingdom mages and knocking them out, this is when suddenly one of them would then try attacking Asta with a full powered attack. Something that Asta already knew how to deflect as he prepares to bring out another or just to summon out an anti-magic sword in general, but this one suddenly it would then be interrupted by a generous wind blast, as suddenly approaching Asta will be none other than Yuno. Now Yuno, upon seeing his brother, would immediately notice something was off about him, as he would see Asta, instead of just screaming loudly Yuno or just being like over dramatic like how he usually is, he would actually have a much more dull reaction, to say the least, as he would just send a soft smile at Yuno before waving at him, as Yuno, immediately seeing this, would do nothing more but frown. As he approaches Asta for a few seconds, as he begins asking him what was up, with Asta just telling him, a simple answer known as life. This will cause Yuno to immediately raise his eyebrows, since he knows for sure that Asta is not the type of person to be answering a question like that. Meanwhile, Yuno's spirit itself would be very confused about who Asta was, and also why Yuno was actually showing concern for him, even though he never showed concern for her. As she would be looking at the two of them confused and also feeling upset, while Yuno, he continues trying to talk to Asta, or trying to get a reaction out of him at least, even making fun of his height at some points during the conversation. But even with all that, Asta just didn't show a reaction or really show to even be focusing on Yuno's conversation right now, as in fact he was so stuck in his head by this point that even with the insults that Yuno would throw, Asta showed little to no reaction at all, which once again made Yuno even more concerned. But before he could be blunt and just start asking his brother what happened, this is when suddenly Langris would then arrive. As right at the time that he had arrived, this is when Finral would arrive as well. As during this point, we will see things then play out similar to the main timeline here, with Langris basically insulting Finral and boosting up Asta, but also at the same time putting down the Black Bulls in general. And Finral trying to argue against it, and this is when Asta during this point would also do the same thing that he did in the main timeline by proving Langris wrong. But the way he went about it was a lot different. As you see, when the mage actually came around to try to attack the Magic Knights, as he was the one holding all the people captive and everything, before anyone could even react or take action, Asta would one-shot the guy out of his own magic, as he had casually once again chucked the anti-magic blade like a spear and telling the guy to shut up. As this would cause Langris and Yuno to look at Asta extremely surprised, with Langris being surprised of Asta's power, and Yuno being surprised because Asta does not act like that, and this is not how Asta is supposed to be in Yuno's eyes. As he was now extremely concerned for Asta, meanwhile Finral would just be looking on in complete amazement about what Asta had done. As after Asta had taken down the mage, this is where we will then see Finral give Langris the same speech that he did in the main timeline, which causes Langris to be pissed off, as afterwards we will then see Finral and Asta then leave, with Asta just casually waving goodbye to Yuno, but at the same time you could see that he was barely paying attention to him. Something that once again made Yuno frown, as Langris tries to talk down to Asta and everything, but Yuno was not in the mood, just telling him to shut up. As this will cause Langris to also be surprised but also pissed off, as right after Yuno would then leave, Langris would then show an extremely angry expression, as he was getting really tired of these commoners, as he begins to think of both Asta and Yuno. As now with these events taken care of, this is where we can now move on to the next following arc. As turning to the events that happened to the Witch's Forest arc, we could actually skim forward this, mostly because of the fact that since Asta's arms are okay, nothing really happens here. Rather than that, we will actually get to see Asta himself, as during this point, Asta has been going through a little bit of not even a little bit, let's be honest here, a big change. As throughout this time, Asta will be mostly focused on his training and actually going on missions by himself. As once again, this will cause a generous amount of concern throughout the Black Bulls, as they will see Asta just going through the motions, not even talking to people basically, as he would just be going off doing his own thing. At most, they would probably see him for breakfast and lunch and dinner and stuff like that, but after that, they barely heard from him or see him ever again. As once again, this caused a large amount of concern, as even though they tried to approach him and talk to him, Asta wasn't really too open-minded with the idea. And it got so bad to the point where even Yami decided to intervene. As we will now turn to the events that take place there. Turning to Asta at this very moment, as he was in the midst of his training, we will then turn to see Yami, as he would just be there watching him, with Asta asking Yami what he was doing, since he could already sense his presence. Now Yami would just be there looking at Asta casually, just telling him that he was here to take a little bit of a smoke break, to which Asta says no more. As after a while, the two of them would just remain there in silence, with Asta then finally deciding to ask a question, asking Yami how could he deal with the idea of death. as how could he get over the fact that he just ended a man's life, with Yami then being extremely brutal as he just calmly tells Asta that he has no choice but to get over it. And for that moment, you would see a brief silence then fill the area, with Yami doing nothing more but just smoking and Asta just remaining still for a moment, before suddenly that's when it would then break. As Asta moving so fast that Yami couldn't even react, Yami could feel himself then get pinned to a wall as Asta would be grabbing his shirt and everything as he would be glaring at him angrily. As for the first time ever, Asta would actually be standing up to Yami by this point, as he then screams at him, asking him how the heck is he able to just deal with it and move on. Like, he made it sound so easy when it really isn't. As Asta begins to actually vent out frustrations about the whole idea, how it's been affecting him and everything, while Yami, even though he knows that Asta could very well do him some serious damage after what he did to Veto, he still remained calm and just listened to him going on a rant. As Asta by this point now, after seeing that Yami was not at all budging or doing anything to him, this is where we could actually see him finally successfully break down. As he then tells Yami that he has no idea what to even decide at this point, and he has no idea if he even wants to continue going down the route of becoming Wizard King. As after all, if it meant that he had to do something like that again, he didn't know if he had the will to actually go through with it. But right as Asta was about to fully break down in tears and everything, this is when, to his surprise, Yami would then punch Asta directly into his face, sending him flying a couple of feet into the air before landing. As this would shock Asta so much that he's completely snapped out of it as he looks at Yami, with Yami telling Asta to actually grow a spine. As in typical anime moments, this is where we will then see Yami as he gives Asta the best advice that he could ever give him, basically being all philosophical with Asta and having a rare moment where he actually shows how wise he really is. As Asta hearing Yami giving him this advice and everything, he would be just completely shell-shocked, as right after Yami would be done with it, this is when he would then leave to head back to the Black Bull's base, telling Asta that it's all up to him what he does at this point on, as he already gave Asta the advice, but it's now up to him whether or not he could take it. And Asta, after thinking about it for a while, as he would just be there laying on the ground for a few seconds, this is where for the very first time in a long time, we would see Asta then release a full-on laugh. He truly begins to laugh for the first time in a long time since the incident. As he laughs and begins holding his stomach and everything from both pain and also because he was laughing too hard, as he would just be there enjoying himself for the first time ever before finally calming down, as he couldn't believe how dumb these events have really been, especially with the whole idea that Yami legit punched a guy that was crying and everything just that way he could teach him a lesson. But still, it didn't change the fact that Asta was still extremely grateful for him, as he would then get up mentally thanking Yami once again, as this is where we would then see him get back to training, but this time with a whole new different vibe and energy about it. As right after that, we can now move forward with the rest of the events that happened then, as from that point on, we will see Asta revert back to his typical self, as he'll be back to being very energetic, very cheerful and everything, much to the happiness of the rest of the Black Bulls. As they'll be happy to see Asta going back to normal, and even though Asta was still acting like himself and everything, he did learn a lot from the experience that happened with Veto. As it was safe to say that Asta truly did mature following these events and everything, as even though he was still energetic and everything, Asta made sure to be much more wiser when it comes to certain things, and especially when it came to battle, as Asta had been training himself very specifically for this moment to actually gain more control over himself. And this would actually help out a lot, especially following the very next event that's coming up, this being the Royal Knights arc. Now turning to the events of the Royal Knights arc, we will see them begin exactly as it does in the main timeline, with Asta and the rest of his group now recovering from basically all the missions they've been doing, and also all the training that they've been doing. As the Black Bulls seeing Asta once again being cheerful and everything and trying to improve himself, they actually get inspired to do the same thing, which ends up resulting in the entirety of the group growing stronger, but also on them going on way more missions, which would be very beneficial in these events now. As currently right now, we will see the Black Bulls at a festival, as today will be the day they find out about the rankings of each Magic Knight squad. As at this very moment, we will see all the Black Bulls just enjoying themselves and having a blast, already thinking that they're going to be in last place, only to then be surprised as the very first name to be announced during the ranking and the one taking first place would be none other than the Black Bulls, this time over the Golden Dawn in this timeline. As this will surprise everyone, I mean, all the Magic Knight squads, all the captains, and especially the Black Bulls. As eventually, this is when, as Julius would be explaining why exactly they were the number one, this is when he would then call out Asta's name, to which Asta hearing this would then be surprised, until Yami would then chuck him up there, as he just casually ends up landing right there, as he will be announced as basically the star rookie of the Black Bulls, causing everyone to be very much impressed with him. And he would not be the only one, as following after Asta would be none other than the Golden Dawn team, who obviously came in second place. With the one being shown as a star rookie, obviously being Yuno, who would also be presented. As the two of them will gain a large amount of credibility and also a lot of people cheering for them, as both Asta and Yuno realized that they made it. With Yuno actually staring at Asta a lot more, as he'll be smiling to see that Asta was now back to his usual self. Although he did see that Asta seems to have matured a lot more following whatever was happening with him. As now with these events now taken care of, this is where we will then get the announcements of the Royal Magic Night exams, which causes everyone to cheer in excitement as they realize that, the Abandonment Night Sun were eventually gonna be taken down. As afterwards, they'll then announce how much time they have to prepare, to which Asta hearing this would then smile, since he had his own idea of training that he really wanted to work on. As right after that, we will then see the rest of them then leave the area, as we will now turn to the following weeks that they had for training. As during this time, we will see every last one of the Magic Knights going through their own versions of training and everything, with Asta in particular going through a very special training himself. As while all the Black Bulls would be going through their own types of training and everything, Asta himself would actually be doing something completely different, as instead of doing the typical physical training that he usually does, Asta would actually be doing a little bit more of a mental training aspect on this one. As turning to Asta right now, who will be in the midst of the woods, we will see him just casually holding onto the Demon Slayer sword, as he'll be taking up as much anti-magic as possible. As when he does so, this is where we will then see Asta, as in his mind we will see the surrounding area then change, as it will then turn into a red-like room. As Asta seeing this would then look up very casually, as he would then see a demon-like entity inside his mindscape basically. As this is where the demon then begins to laugh, as he begins to actually, welcome Asta to his domain and everything, saying that he has been waiting for him for quite a while. As Asta would be there looking at him before smirking, as this is where we will now do a little bit of a flashback. As you see, during the time when Asta was training to use his anti-magic and everything, there was a brief instance that during the time when Asta was gathering as much anti-magic as possible, he actually had a run-in with this thing before. And needless to say, Asta during the first interaction was obviously very caught off guard and also very spooked, considering the fact that he wasn't as strong as he is now, and also he was still new to this whole energy idea and everything. So due to that, when seeing this thing for the first time, Asta panicked and everything, which caused this thing to be very amused with him. As after Asta would calm down and everything, the thing would actually tell Asta that it was gonna help him from now on, lending him his power here and there. As this actually allowed Asta to progress a lot more when it came to his training, but no matter how many times he tried getting into contact with that thing more and more, unfortunately it just never worked. Until now at least. As currently right now turning to Asta, we will now see him finally staring down at the entity, with the entity begin talking to Asta, asking him what he wants, with Asta then casually just sitting down crisscross, as he then begins actually talking to him and just trying to befriend him, surprising the demon itself. As Asta just begins asking how its day has been and everything, with obviously this person who, okay, I'm just gonna say it's Libe, alright? This huge form of Libe just staring at Asta in complete shock, wondering what's wrong with this guy. As the very first time he met Asta, he was obviously very much impressed with his strength, but other than that, he only wanted him for one purpose, and that was to take over his body so that he can get his revenge. But yet here this guy was trying to act all friendly and befriend him, as this action would actually cause this ginormous illusion that he created to be completely shattered due to how caught off guard he was. As Libe would be there staring at Asta blatantly, now staring him down, as he begins to ask Asta what's wrong with him, with Asta very casually shrugging and just telling Libe that he wants to be friends. As Asta then reveals that throughout this entire time he knows that Libe has been helping him out when it came to mastering his anti-magic basically. As he knows that Libe has been the one kind of pushing it through his system a lot faster than it usually is, and he also knows that if it wasn't for Libe, Asta wouldn't go as far as he is now, or at least that's what he thinks. So due to that, he decided to finally, befriend Libe here and now and thank him for everything that he's done. With Libe, after seeing Asta's, the way he talks and the way he's acting towards him, he would actually see a brief glimpse of Lichita right in front of him. As seeing this would cause Libe to immediately, shake a little bit, as this is when he would then tell Asta to leave. With Asta then doing so, not wanting to upset him, as he then tells Libe that he'll be back here to visit him once again. With Libe saying nothing more, as he really did not want to deal with Asta right now, as he can't help but feel shaken up about the idea that Asta may be Lichita's son. As now with this brief interaction taken care of, for the next following weeks that went by in preparation for the Royal Magic Knight exams, we will see Asta as he focused more on getting closer to Libe and befriending him, with Libe obviously being very reluctant and hesitant, until eventually he would begin seeing Asta as a friend, due to the fact that Asta was extremely kind to him, and also because of the fact that Asta was just too similar to Lichita, enough to the point where Libe then deduced that Asta was Lichita's son. So due to that, we will then see Asta as he finally gets into true contact with Libe and everything, which would actually progress his mastery over anti-magic, as it will be way further, he would gain a lot more abilities compared to how it was before, something that he was extremely happy about. As this would eventually all lead up to the Royal Magic Knight exams itself, as we would then see the brackets and pairings exactly the same as it was in the main timeline. Now turning to the matches that play out, we will see them play out almost exactly as it does in the main timeline here, but there being just a slight few differences here and there. The one thing to particularly take note of here is the fact that Asta would actually be having an easier time in his part of the exams, mostly because of the fact that Asta would just be going through all the challenges or all his opponents with ease. As no matter what they threw at him, Asta will be able to deal with it, with this allowing both his teammates like Zora and Mimosa to be able to make it past every single round with relative ease. As even though the rest of Asta's squad mates would try doing their best to pitch in, except for Zora, it didn't really matter too much considering the fact that Asta was fully fully on board with the idea of letting himself take care of the entire thing, as he really wanted to prove himself. As this will go on until eventually it will be finally time for the final bracket, as even though the rest of Asta's friends tried to make it past the round and make it to the finals, unfortunately they were not able to maintain it for too long. As the finals of the Royal Magic Knight exam will be none other than facing off against Asta. And for those wondering about what happened between Asta and Longoris, the fight between these two, just so that you know, Longoris lost, and this time it wasn't a theatrical battle. It was over immediately. Asta did not hold back, he did not hesitate, as he knocked him out immediately and also destroyed his crystal. As needless to say, Asta did not like it when someone messed with his friends, and he especially did not like it when someone nearly killed his friends. So due to that, we will then have the final matchup between both Asta and Yuno, with both of them just waiting patiently for the match to begin. As once they finally get the green light from Julius, we will then see the two of them then rush at each other, as they will then collide. Now the rest of the squad tries to pitch in and everything to help the other two, but Asta and make sure to tell them to stay out of it, as it was a fight only between the two of them. And for this fight, we will see something amazing, as we will see both Asta and as they immediately begin clashing with each other, using all their abilities that they can, with being surprised about how much Asta had improved. As Asta was very easily able to cut through wind blades or any wind spell that he was able to throw at him, as in fact this fight was beginning to look extremely one-sided on Asta's part at least, as Asta would be able to completely overwhelm any type of spell that would throw at him, and when it came to physical power, just could not beat Asta. As even though had been training and trying his best to keep up with Asta, unfortunately it wasn't a contest. Asta had outclassed him in everything. Speed, strength, whatever you named it, Asta had beaten him in. As even though would try his best, even bringing out his strongest move, which being Storm Sylph, unfortunately it didn't work on Asta. As thanks to Asta mastering anti-magic throughout this point and getting a better hand over it, it will be more than enough to easily beat and surprising everyone completely. Since was the same guy that was able to go toe to toe with the captain, and yet here he was easily getting outclassed by Asta. As this made everyone wonder exactly how strong Asta really was, with the fight eventually coming down to just a final clash between the two of them, with getting knocked out the sky and it actually getting sent back to his crystal. As this will be enough to declare Asta's squad the winner, putting an end to the Royal Magic Knight exams. As now with these events taken care of, we can now flash forward with the next following events here, mostly because of the fact that most of the events that end up happening next are not really too important or really change too much with the story. As afterwards, we will see like all the Magic Knights like wait for their results, to which obviously all of them that participated end up like going to be a part of the Royal Magic Knights. And by all of them, I mean all the Black Bulls. As legit, every last one of them performed extremely well during these like exams, enough to the point where they were now officially, accepted as a Royal Magic Knight. Surprising a lot of those that thought the Black Bulls wouldn't be as impactful as they are now. As now with all the Black Bulls, that participated being part of the Royal Magic Knights, we will see them having a larger increased number, which would be more than enough to actually help them when it came to raiding the Eye of the Midnight Sun base. And this time, the way that they go about it is a lot more clever. As instead of just barging in there, doing everything they can to capture all the people there and everything, they'll go about it much more smartly. As they actually begin sneakily going through it, knocking down their enemies and everything, with mostly Eye of the Midnight Sun not noticing this until way later. As needless to say, we will see all the Eye of the Midnight Sun members get overthrown rather easily, as even though they would try their best to put up a fight and everything, it would end in failure. As by the time both Licht as well as Raya found out about everything that was going on, it would be too late. As even though Licht would try heading back to the Clover Kingdom to try to take on the Wizard King and get the magic stones, the fight between these two would go completely different. As by this point now, Yami already feeling extremely untrustworthy towards, William, considering the fact of just how silent he's been and everything and just how sketchy he is, he'd actually be able to get there much sooner. And this would be due to the fact of also because of the training that he's been doing, as after seeing his squad actually begin to take the time and effort to improve themselves, this would also cause Yami to do the same thing. As he ends up arriving there just in time to save Julius, from Licht, and with the two of them together, I'm sorry, Licht is not going to be able to do anything, alright? He nearly lost to Julius, and you're telling me he can take on Julius and Yami? Come on now, stop it. So yeah, we will see Licht get defeated by Julius and Yami. Meanwhile, back at the Eye of the Midnight Sun, we would see them just get completely raided, as they didn't even get the chance to do the Elf Reincarnation during this time. In this timeline, the Elf Reincarnation does not happen, fortunately. As now with these events taken care of, this is where we can now do one big time skip. As now from this point on, we can now skim forward with a little bit, not even a little bit, a lot of the story from this point on. As you see, thanks to Asta's growth as a character, and also thanks to the rest of the characters growing as well, we could actually see a lot of the problems that emerged in the main timeline wouldn't emerge here. As Zagred, failing to have the ability to, actually get a Grimoire for himself, wouldn't be able to get his physical appearance. And thanks to the Eye of the Midnight Sun being taken down much sooner, there'll be no trial for Asta, and also Nero, who does eventually end up revealing herself. As Nero would reveal herself and everything, but during the time when she does so, she'll do about it differently. As during the time when the Magic Knights were raiding the Eye of the Midnight Sun's base, Nero would be there watching everything go down, but she wouldn't be there paying attention to them, as she was mostly focusing on one person or one thing to appear, which it would be Zagred, who would appear during the midst of all this in the shadows, watching all this with an extremely upset look on his face. Now I would have believed that his plan that took so many years was now going to have to take much longer to go into effect, as he couldn't believe that Licht had failed so miserably, or should he say Patri had failed so miserably that he couldn't even get a chance to get into the real world. But it didn't matter, as he was still confident that he could do so, it's just that it would take a lot more time now. But right as he was in the midst of planning it all, Nero, being basically one of the most solid characters out there, she would actually end up intervening right then and there, as she ended up revealing her true appearance to the dark form of Zagred. As due to him being extremely weak by this point and not being able to do anything, he could do nothing more but stare at her in complete shock, as he realized who she was, remembering, her from all those years ago. As he would then curse her out, just for simply existing, but Nero didn't care any at all. She didn't care about it at all. As instead, she just simply used her magic to seal Zagred away permanently, preventing him from ever rising ever again, and also finally fulfilling the mission that the first Wizard King was supposed to do. As she felt by doing this that the first Wizard King can finally be given peace, as she would actually shed a couple of tears at that moment. As now with Zagred taken care of and the rest of the events now finally coming down to an end, this is where we can now turn to the much more important events that end up happening. I'm talking about the events that happen with the Spade Kingdom. As you see, the whole thing about the Hard Kingdom and all that stuff, that still ends up going down, with the Black Bulls getting assigned to go there. And Asta more specifically being the one, the main person to go there,
as he would go there with Mimosa, Finral, and Noelle. As every last one of them would end up going over there to, talk to the Heart Kingdom, as after going through a little bit of a trial and battle here and there, they would eventually end up finding out about the Spade Kingdom and also the Dark Triad. As when Asta ends up hearing about the leader of the Dark Triad, this would cause Libe inside the Grimoire to immediately grow furious, with Asta sensing the anger, as this is when Asta finally is able to connect like all the dots basically about why Libe was here. I mean, he was not able to connect all the dots, but he knows that, Dainty has like a connection as to why he was here in the first place. As making sure to calm down Libe, Asta would then tell him that he vows that they're going to grow strong enough to take him on, as right after that, we will then have the following months of them training. With Asta during this time, he'd gotten another great power boost by this point. As thanks to Asta, like before Asta was already strong, by this point now, he had gotten another level of strength. As by this point now, Asta's Viltrumite genes were fully in effect. As not only did he learn about his ability to full on fly, he also learned just about like how adaptable he really was. As during the time of his training, Asta had basically been put through every trial you can imagine. Whether it be legit getting like put through a literal volcano or legit like, getting struck with lightning, it didn't matter, as Asta would be hit with it all. But you see, the thing is, surprisingly enough to anyone that was actually participated or even saw Asta's training, he remained unaffected by it all. As in fact, he remained rather calm, and in fact, his body was able to adjust to it. As that's exactly what Asta would do throughout the entirety of those months, just simply adapting his body to anything that was thrown at him, causing it to grow stronger and causing Asta to master more and more of anti-magic. As this will play out extremely helpful during the following last few moments, as we will now turn to the final arc, as this being the full-on attack between the Clover Kingdom and the Spade Kingdom. As turning to the current events that are happening right now, we will now turn to see Asta, as by this point now he would just be there casually sitting on top of the Black Bull's base, as he would just be there looking up into the sky and everything and just, enjoying the feeling that he was getting. As by this point now, Asta would just be like relaxing and chilling until eventually this is when he would then get a call on his communication, device. It wasn't a phone, but it's basically like the mage equivalent of a phone. As he ends up answering the device, to then get, to then reveal it will be none other than Noelle. As she ends up informing Asta that she, along with Mimosa, had taken care of one of the Spade Kingdom bases. As throughout this point, throughout these months that went by, while they had been training, they also had been slowly but surely taking care of the Spade Kingdom, making sure to slowly but surely take care of their small bases before now targeting the bigger ones once they're at the power level they need to be. As Noelle ends up explaining that they took care of another one of the bases, and not only that, but she also ends up informing that she took care of Magiscula. As Asta, after hearing this, can do nothing more but actually smirk at this and nod, as Noelle can do nothing more but also, smirk and blush as well, as she ends up, hanging up the device while calling Asta an idiot. As he ends up chuckling, since by this point now he knows how she feels about him, but he was not yet fully into the idea of getting into a relationship just yet. Or at least not now, as after all, they still had to go through one more obstacle. And Asta was just casually chilling right here, just waiting for it to appear. And right as Asta was thinking about the man, he would then appear himself, as right as Asta was just chilling at the Black Bull's base, this is when Dainty would then arrive. You see, throughout these months that went by, Asta made it very apparent to target everything personal about Dainty. His favorite bases, the favorite locations that he likes to be in, it didn't matter. He would go after it exclusively. Even though it was extremely dangerous, Asta didn't really care, and Libe was fully on board with it, as he made sure to back up Asta every single time. As Asta and Libe had been on a tear throughout these following months, ruining Dainty's peace, and as he finally had enough of them and decided to take care of them himself, which is why he was here at this very moment. We will see Asta in response, just casually just chilling, sitting down, enjoying the view, treating this as if it was just a typical day, while Dainty then tells Asta that he's gonna make sure that he ends him extremely brutally and make him pay for everything that he's done to him. But Asta, after hearing this, instead of full on being shocked or being scared, he actually just ends up laughing at the whole idea. As this when he then tells Dainty that this has been something that's been long awaited, but this is when he then reveals to him that this revenge wasn't his, alright? This revenge wasn't Asta's. As this is where we will then see Asta as he very casually ends up approaching Dainty, actually flying up to him, surprising, Dainty himself, as He thought that Asta had no magic whatsoever, and even now he still couldn't feel none from Asta, as this is when Asta then tells Dainty that he's gonna make him pay for what he did to his friend. Or should he say his brother. As Dainty hearing this would be confused, only to be surprised as he would then be sucker punched in the jaw, with his jaw breaking from the impact as he would be sent flying through the air before then crashing into the ground. As Dainty feeling the blow would stagger for a little bit, as he would then see Asta very casually approaching him. As seeing Asta approaching, this is where he would then begin using his gravity magic, upping up his percentage of demon energy as he then calls upon 50% of Lucifero's energy. As using Lucifero's magic, this is where he would then begin casting a ginormous gravity spell on Asta, attempting on crushing him. However, to his surprise, Asta would just be shrugging it off, as even though gravity has been increased multiple times, enough to the point where even large boulders were turned to dust, Asta would show little to no reaction to it at all. As instead, he would just casually look down his fist for a moment before then smirking, as he would then charge at Dainty with a brutal punch. As Dainty gets sent flying once again, crashing into the surrounding area as he's not able to do anything from the force of the impact. As it was enough that he actually was able to crack a large majority of Dainty's bones, which caused him to once again use more and more of Lucifero's energy. As he begins cursing at Asta, as he's now no longer having any fun at all. Deciding to jump up to even 80% of Lucifero's energy, this is when he would then create a miniature black hole, telling Asta that he got lucky all those times before, and that this time he was really going to make sure to end him, sending a literal black hole to Asta, intending on ending his life. However, to the surprise of Dainty, Asta seeing the black hole approaching, instead of at least trying to dodge it or showing any fear, Asta would then charge directly into it, surprising Dainty as he thought that Asta was an idiot for doing so, only to then be surprised and also horrified. As legit, even though Asta would be sucked into the black hole and everything, to Dainty's surprise, the whole force of the black hole will begin to kind of diverge or kind of begin to be disrupted, as Dainty will be actually shaken up to his core, as he'll be stirring as he will see nothing more but two hands legitimately grab onto the black hole before suddenly ripping it apart, as Asta would exit out the black hole completely fine and unscathed. As Dainty seeing this knew at this very moment that he screwed up big time. And this would show as Asta would very casually, with no reaction whatsoever, then suddenly bum rush him. As he straight up do a full on, like a football tackle right then and there, he tackles Dainty and slams him into the ground before then drilling him into it, as Dainty is not able to do anything at all. He tries to push Asta away, but unfortunately when it comes to physical strength, Asta had completely outmatched Dainty. As for the very next few moments, as Dainty tries to, get back on his feet, Asta then begins to brutally break him down. And by that, I mean he truly begins to full on fist fight him and everything, not even using anti-magic. As even though Dainty had most definitely a lot more hacks than Asta, had a lot more abilities than Asta, unfortunately Asta was his number one counter. As not only did Asta outclass him in physical strength and speed, but he also outclassed him with the very one ability that's able to counter the entirety of Dainty, this being anti-magic. As after a while of just simply slapping Dainty around and just making sure to really make him feel pain for everything he's done, this is when Asta then decides to end it. As casually beginning to grab one of the demon blades that he has, this being the Demon Slayer sword, this is when Asta would then begin to gather a large amount of anti-magic, telling Dainty that this was something that was a long time coming, as Dainty himself could do nothing more but look on in pure horror. As suddenly, in the very next moment, we will then see Asta as he would then be eclipsed by a dark and red armor that would just completely cover his entire body, as his eyes would then change from the normal green color to that of red, as he would just be casually staring down at Dainty, as he would have two grown demon-like wings then spread from his back, as he will be holding the Demon Slayer sword. As Dainty looking at this will look on in complete shock, before suddenly he would then hear a voice call out to him, and when he does, he will be shocked to see it. It will be a small Libe, small form of Libe, who will be very casually on Asta's shoulder, as this is when he would then be staring at Dainty, or more precisely, he will be staring at Lucifero, letting him know that even though he was not here or now, he would eventually find him and hunt him down personally. As for the first time ever, Lucifer actually felt shaken up by this as he sees the pure malice in Li Bei's eyes, and also he will see the cold and emotionless look in Asta's eyes. As right at this very moment, we will then see Asta then use his anti-magic abilities as the Demon Slayer sword will then grow into a ginormous size, literally towering over even the Black Bull's base itself. As legit Dainty could do nothing more but look on in complete shock, as he will then try entering Lucifer's like 100% mode in order to try to take him on. But unfortunately for Dainty, it was pointless, as Asta, using all his strength, would then suddenly slam down the sword as Dainty tries to do anything to stop it, but it was pointless, as all the magic in that area was just completely erased due to just the sheer amount of anti-magic. As Asta would slam the Demon Slayer sword directly into Dainty before eventually now truly finishing him off. As Dainty would be hit, as the hit would be so strong they shook up the very core of the earth itself. As this will be something that surprised everyone who felt it, as they wonder if it was an earthquake or something else. But they could do nothing more but just focus on their own lives or their own actions at this very moment. As turning back to Asta, we will now look at Dainty, or what was left of him, as he will be nothing more but a smudge by this point. As Asta made sure really not to hold back, as he will be staring down at Dainty with a cold expression. As by this point now, Asta usually wants to go down the route of letting people have, justice or anything like that. But after everything that Dainty has done, as Asta made sure to keep track of everything he has done, Asta knew that one of these moments right here, that this was just not that time. As he looks at Dainty for a moment before turning to Li Bei and letting him know that the day they found Lucifer, he would go through the same thing, if not much worse. And Li Bei, hearing this, would also agree as he nods with Asta, as the two of them would do nothing more but look up into the sky in preparation for what's more to come in the future. But still, nonetheless, as now with Dainty defeated and now the rest of the Dark Triad also being defeated, as eventually by the time that all this was taken care of and everything, the Clover Kingdom would be finally able to regain the Spade Kingdom. This is where we can now do a large time skip. As now flashing forward to the years, we will now see many things begin to happen. Obviously being the fact that the Clover Kingdom has continued to evolve, continue to grow as just a kingdom in general. As by this point now, as multiple years have gone by, we will see that a new Wizard King has been announced. Julius by this point has fully stepped down, mostly because of the fact that he's at an old age and decides to just enjoy his retirement, which would be mostly just studying new magic or trying to learn new magic itself. And while he will be in the midst of doing this is when someone else will then take on his duties and responsibilities as the Wizard King, with this being none other than Asta. As by this point now, Asta has gone on multiple adventures. He had faced the demon race full on completely throughout those years. He had actually helped out the Spade Kingdom and recovering everything. He actually helped the elves, eventually find peace. And overall, he was able to bring in an entirely new era of peace to the Clover Kingdom, bringing peace among not just the Clover Kingdom, but the Heart Kingdom and also the Spade Kingdom as well. As Asta has grown into a true legend throughout the entirety of these years, as you could say, he truly did become a powerful emperor during this time. As the very last scene we will see from this what if will be Asta, as he'll be looming over the entirety of the Clover Kingdom, as he will see many of the Magic Knights there as they'll be looking at him before them bowing their heads. As Asta can do nothing more but actually smile at this, happy to see everything that he worked hard on was finally, bearing fruit, and that was actually making a difference now. As this will be the last scene we will see from this what if, as this will be the end to what if Asta was a Viltrumite. Thank y'all so much for seeing this what if. I really hope y'all do enjoy. If you guys have any of your own what if recommendations, please type them below in the comment section, as I'm always liking the ideas that you guys give, but please make sure it's appropriate. And other than that, y'all, it's your host Seiji Samurai here. Sorry for taking so long when it comes to uploads, but hey, I'm back in the booth and I'm working on it, so y'all can eventually see that soon. But yeah, y'all, it's your host Seiji Samurai, and he's signing off. So peace and have a lovely day.
Colors, switch the color, 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 colors, switch the color, 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 switch the color.